Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are on a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com.
He's considered the greatest broadcaster in wrestling history. And now, WWE Hall of Famer Jim Ross brings his legendary voice and his famous friends to the podcast world. Welcome to the Ross Report.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Ross Report. It's a good week to join us. We have a very much anticipated show today because here on the Ross Report, joining me in just a few minutes will be Vince Russo, the controversial former creative fixture at WWE during the Attitude Era. He was also at WCW during their Nitro run, or at least portions thereof, and in TNA. So Vince Russo will be joining us, and we'll get to him just in a few moments. But I want to say thanks to all of you for making our podcast one of the top 10 in the world of sports podcasts on the iTunes Top 300. We've been in the top 5. We've been number 1. We've had some great success, and it's all because of your support in downloading our show on podcastone.com and telling other folks about it, supporting us on social media. All those things are invaluable as we're growing a brand here together. So we appreciate everybody's support. And I also want to say thanks again for checking out and supporting our sponsors. It sounds trite perhaps, but we couldn't do these shows without the sponsors. I mean, there's just no way. They're the reason we do it for free, quite frankly, and we do it every single week. So I don't plan on taking any vacations, and so we're going to keep chipping away here and bringing you good shows. But, helping our sponsors helps us, and so just suggesting that you, check out Podcast ONE, podcast1.com. Click on the Keep Our Podcast Free banner, and then click on the Ross Report button. And that whole deal is all about Amazon, because Amazon's a proud sponsor of the show. You'll find all my Amazon links right there on that page as well when you hit that Ross Report button. I got links for Amazon UK, Amazon Canada, and Amazon USA. So anytime you're doing any online shopping, please click to Amazon through my link and help support the show. And there's no gimmicks, there's no hidden fees, there's no nothing, there's no catches. It's just easy stuff, and that'll help us keep this baby free each and every week. I want to start what's on my mind this week with, let's go to WWE. I think that's a good place to start as any. The build to the Night of Champions has been arguably very one-dimensional, in as much as the event is being built around the return match from SummerSlam, where John Cena was beaten and destroyed and lost the WWE World title to Brock Lesnar. So this is the obligatory return match, as I understand it. So, but that's the big story. Is there anything else really red hot going into Night of Champions? Hey, there's been a lot of successful pay-per-views that where one match pulled the wagon. I mean, you can think of a lot of illustrations where that one match was the match that you really paid to see, and all the other was gravy. First food reference early. And it beat Sonic. So there you go. So I think that the build has been a little one-dimensional, but I get it because there's only one major dimension to build, right? Interesting storyline. I'm wondering, will John Cena still? I'm wondering if he's still going to tweak his TV persona a little bit before Night of Champions, or is he going to show up at Night of Champions with a different demeanor? I'd like to, if, as a viewer and just following the story along, I'd like to see more of that evolution of John Cena if it was in reality, knowing what he's facing, because you're basically walking the gallows of another ass whooping. Walking the gallows to where an ass whooping awaits. So, I just think that it would add a little edge to the Cena character and help keep this story even hotter. Because they're 1-1. That part hasn't played out much. That in their 2 previous pay-per-views, each have won a match. And maybe I'm just missing it. But, the rubber match can be made into a big deal if you choose to make it a big deal. Because it also subliminally tells the audience that it's the end of the trilogy. This is it. We didn't actually say it was it, but you think it's it because it's the best of 3, and this is the 3rd match. I'm kind of interested from watching TV, the dynamic that Stephanie McMahon and AJ Lee had, the visual, the spark from that exchange on Raw about a week ago now. So I thought that was pretty good, and I think that there may be something there. 2 strong personalities, promos would be great. I hope Dolph Ziggler can have a breakout night at Night of Champions and continue to try to restore some of the luster on the Intercontinental title, which, along with the U.S. title, quite frankly and honestly, mean very little right now. And I say that I wish it were different, and it should be different. Both titles should mean more, but they don't. So, but the good news is those items can be fixed. It's been my experience that some pay-per-views that are essentially positioned as a one-match show, referring back to Ziggler, these talents have a great opportunity to really stand out because there was no expectations, no anticipation significantly built of their match. So you're glad to see them, but you're not expecting anything extraordinarily special tonight because you really haven't thought about this match because it has been kind of and also, starring so-and-so, Night of Champions, starring John Cena versus Brock Lesnar, featuring, and then there's your list. And that's what you got here. So when you got those, you're below the title and you're below the top attraction, then, you gotta do something to get noticed. And I just hope that the guys that are on that card realize that and don't, it's just, this is my role. I'm expected to not hit 300 because I'm in the 8th hole. And for those of you in some foreign country that don't know what the 8th hole means, I'll leave that up to you, and you can Google it. Monday night's just got a little bit more competitive for WWE with the return of Monday Night Football. Thinking out loud here, crazy idea, probably doesn't make any sense, but, maybe WWE should consider a best of 3 or a best of 5 type scenario going into the Monday Night Football season. And let that competition hook the fans prior to the debut and encourages them to watch Raw to see how the scenario that they've been investing in plays out, which would, of course, end on the night of Monday Night Football. Maybe it would not make a dent. I think you're trying there. You're not looking at really taking away from Monday Night Football. You're trying to get your share of what's left because Monday Night Football is going to get theirs. They're going to eat. And so, live with it. But you should. There's enough left to still make an impact and have a great cable rating. I feel that's imperative for WWE to focus more on their some of their newer and their mid-card guys there's not I don't feel the personality development that I wish I could. I'd like to feel more of those guys in the mid-card involved in things that they can sink their teeth in, and I can choose to make an emotional investment in them or not. I can't do it on these indiscriminate one-offs. I need some continuity. We could talk about continuity in wrestling, pro wrestling creative for hours, but we're not. So anyway, I think that those mid-card guys got to have a reason to be there, and not be afraid to bring some new guys up every now and then. I think once a quarter you introduce somebody new. So you're always building or reacting. You're building to someone new. You're reacting to the guy that just got introduced. So there's always just a new buzz about. But you got to book it. You got to say, okay, we're going to debut blank, and then these four guys, these four talents, we're debuting, and here's where we're going to pencil them in. So now we're going to build to those introductions, and that would probably help, create a little bit of interest. But Mondays are going to be hard. Here's another one for you. What about a new faction that's born out of something organic on Raw? A lot of ways to take that, and you'd have some really unique combinations of talents that have ability but don't have a home. Maybe their home is in a faction because there's kind of a story already laid out there. It kind of makes sense. It's going to be interesting to see how this Bella Twins feud will impact the ratings for E's Totally Divas, because all that's tied together, that whole synergy. The Totally Divas show, Monday Night Raw, seem to have more of a synergy together going into this season of Totally Divas on the E! Network than before. That's got to be a good thing if it's good creative. The Bellas are certainly getting some amazing opportunities to build on their TV personas, be it ample, to say the least. Exposure. They're getting a lot of TV time. And that issue is kind of cool, because if you're a gambler or have the cojones to go for it, because you can either have, with this scenario, with all this exposure, you can either be a huge win or epic fail. It's the go away heat that everybody wants to avoid, and that's a delicate thing when you're dealing with today's wrestling fans who watch so much product and have so much access to information. Same logic applies to how WWE is building Roman Reigns, for example. If the fans feel that they are being force-fed Reigns, then there will be a die, Rocky, die backlash. The old die, Rocky, die thing. For what reason? I never figured that one out for sure. So this matter of exposure or overexposure is a slippery slope that can be treacherous to navigate. And folks, we'll have a few more thoughts, a few more things on our mind after you hear this from the folks that keep this podcast free for everybody. I want you folks to know that I believe in DDP and DDP yoga. I've seen the results that they've achieved. It's rescued a lot of guys that I know that were in pretty bad places physically in their life. They were a mess in a lot of ways, but physically was certainly one of them. And Dallas's yoga helped resurrect men like Jake the Snake Roberts and Scott Hall, and rebuild their core. And it's just an amazing thing. My friend Jerry Briscoe, Jerry's 68 years old. He travels recruiting for WWE. He's all over the country scouting these kids. And, man, he's a believer in DDP yoga. It's helped him get his strength back from having 3 strokes. So I've seen it work. I've seen Chris Jericho return to the ring in his 40s. Looked like he hadn't missed a step. So the DDP yoga has helped all those guys that I personally know. So it's the real deal, folks, and I think these guys would tell you the same thing. I just like to suggest this. Go to ddpyoga.com/Jim Ross, and you'll get over 30% off the retail price of this program that works. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your gender. This works on all people. And so just check out the product at ddpyoga.com. It's a great deal. It'll save you some money. So, again, go to ddpyoga.com/Jim Ross, JIMROSS. You won't regret it.
It's time to play the game because Triple H is on. Talk is Jericho. The biggest guest in podcast history is on my show. We're talking about the Click, road stories with Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Shawn Michaels, Hose Wagons, Stephanie McMahon, Vince McMahon. Nothing is left uncovered. It's 2 parts. Triple H on Talk is Jericho. Download it now at podcastone.com.
This is the Ross Report.
Taking a look at TNA Impact Wrestling. I'd rather call them Impact Wrestling. I get annoyed with it. I don't know. Annoyed is probably not the word. But I'm not a big fan of the TNA wrestling. And I understand, it means total nonstop action. Well, maybe to about 0.5% of the people in the world. To the rest of most folks that are breathing, TNA don't mean total nonstop action. But I digress. But speaking of Impact Wrestling, there's not much new to report here. Some of their most recent TV shows, I think, have shown improvement, especially when they stick to the in-ring product, to the in-ring aspect of the presentation. When that gets the most attention, their shows seem to be better and more entertaining. I think the announcing on Impact has been really solid when the bell-to-bell action is sound. The announcing makes it better. Imagine that happening. But if you got to give me a little something on those holes and things, and just so I kind of get it and I can feel the ride I'm being taken on a little bit more vividly. If my imagination can embrace your words, then I can enjoy the experience better as a viewer. So them calling the wrestling side of the wrestling matches is smart, because my eyes and my ears are processing the same information. Multiple processing levels, as it would be in a pro wrestling show, maybe not the most strategic method to take. I have read in Impact a few more layoffs, which is never good, especially when the rumor mill has a promotion on its last legs, which I certainly hope isn't true. I hope they are successful. I've been saying that all along. I'm hearing little buzz about the Bound for Glory event, which is a few weeks away in Japan. I'm not sure that Muda's group, Russell One, has the legs to get it done. We're going to find out, I guess. Time will tell. I have to tell you that I have been impressed with how Impact champion Bobby Lashley has been positioned. I think Bobby's ring work is improved. Solid. It's straightforward stuff, and he plays to his strengths. And I hope that that's not only the company seeing that here's the position this guy needs to play, and let him play, but Bobby feels it as well. He's doing a real good job, I think. So, it's always been the key to good booking. Exploit a talent's strengths and hide their weaknesses. It's as old as the term squared circle, which has been around for many generations. And please, don't ask me what the hell squared circle means. There'll be somebody that knows exactly, and it'll be tweeted out or emailed, which is good. Pass along the information, along the information highway. You can tweet me at JRSBBQ. But nonetheless, the squared circle term, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I am pulling for Impact to make it, and for Spike TV to renegotiate some sort of TV deal with a Nashville-based organization that everybody can live with. Ring of Honor, interesting thing about Ring of Honor, I'm often critical of Ring of Honor in some areas. Yeah, hold on. That was a Route 44, say it together, Diet Peach Tea. Good job. Very refreshing from my neighborhood Sonic. Ring of Honor I was talking about. Sometimes I criticize their production values because they do pretty well stink. I criticize their lighting, which is part of the production values, because it's easily fixed. I never, ever criticize the boys or the heart and the passion that you see on a Ring of Honor show. Never. Nobody's lazy. Ain't nobody phones nothing in on Ring of Honor. That's cool. I will tell you that they had a NFL kid that had some kind of NFL background, and they call him Moose. And, I don't know how that ties into monetizing his background of college and NFL football. I mean, one-word name, Moose. It doesn't hurt in wrestling to have wrestlers with two names. Everybody doesn't have to have one-word names. Everybody's not Cher or Bono or Bono or the Great Bolo. That's another guy. I think that Ring of Honor messed up this kid. I take advantage of that. Anything that gets Ring of Honor noticed on Sports Center, on Fox Sports, any feature that the sports world can do on a former football player now wrestling in that environment is newsworthy, and that should be sold. And you get some stretch out of it. But if you don't recognize it, you just call the guy Moose. The most famous moose in my life was Bullwinkle. So I don't understand. That's what I'm relating to now is Moose. I think of Bullwinkle. And of course, when I think of my favorite flying squirrel, it's always Rocky. It's Rocky, right? Rocky and Bullwinkle. All right. So Moose, wasted name, wasted opportunity, Ring of Honor. You can fix that very easily. There's a solution. It's a marketing fumble, pun intended. I can see Ring of Honor doing more to build their champion, Michael Elgin, whose work I happen to like, by the way. Old school guy, old school body. Nothing wrong with his body. Just, thick. Seen a ton of guys. He's got a very stereotypical old school wrestler look, and I don't have a problem with it. But he does a good job. I'd like to know more about him. You'd think that if that's your guy right now, am I doing everything I can to build him? Are there any vignettes? Are there any sit-down interviews? Kevin Kelly does a great job. He could sit-down interview, a little feature, a little ongoing feature. And maybe that's happened and I've missed it. And if it has, I apologize. But I'd like to know Michael Elgin better if he's going to be your guy. And then underneath, you could just start having ratings matches to see who's the number one contender. So it's a deal where you get your undercard involved in personal issues, all leading to a goal. The goal is becoming the number one contender. So by hook or crook, somebody's going to become the number one contender. And so then they can become a marked man. It's just episodic booking, but you have to create some foundation, some base to build everything on. And that would, I think, eliminate a lot of the multiple person matches you see sometimes on Ring of Honor big events. You got 3 or 4 guys in a match. I don't dislike them. I just think that they probably they're good for about bringing out of the closet once or twice a year for a fatal 4-ways and all that stuff. Keep them special. Soon, here's the deal. People say, well, why would you do that? To keep them special? Because at what point do things cease being special? And where do you go from here? You ever think of that? Where do you go from here? So I, again, tip my hat to the talent and crew at Ring of Honor for their relentless work ethic. They have that, and they have passion. And by God, that's worth something. So I just wish things were a little bit better for you. But don't give up the ghost. I watch the show pretty much every week. Oklahoma City, Fox affiliate. And it's on like 2 networks in Oklahoma City, and it's on. They rerun the shows. They air like 4 times in the Oklahoma City market on the weekend, I think. So they get good exposure. in the old days, Watts had TV like that. He would have made a fortune out of Oklahoma City program in that town. Local TV. They have local TV. Now, you can see somebody running now and looking at all the Sinclair stations. Where are they? And now, does any of these cluster of stations make any sense for a territory? Now, if you decide to take that program and play it out, do a business plan, or write a thesis, or do a college paper on it, keep me informed. I'm anxious to see what conclusions you come to. Take the Sinclair local stations, look at them in clusters. Do any of the clusters make a small territory, which has to have more than 7 towns by the rule I just came up with? So you can tweet me what you find out, or you can email me, or you can catch me in Norman and tell me about it, whatever. I'll talk to you at an OU game. Lucha Underground. Lucha Underground has some folks talking within the wrestling business, specifically wondering how the new brand will be presented. I'm hearing all sorts of rumors as to the show having a different approach to the genre. I'm not a big fan of reinventing the wheel thinking as a rule, but, I'm open-minded enough to give what is being described to me as some revolutionary and ultra-modern production elements to this show that debuts on the El Rey Network in October. So stay tuned for that. A lot of crazy rumors about Lucha Underground. I don't have any idea what to believe. I wish them success. If it provides work for some of the boys in our business, it gives the fans something else to enjoy if they choose to, more power to everybody. So the more the better. Come one, come all. I tell you, he's already here. We're ready. We're going to come back with Vince Russo. Again, thanks for being with us. I'm excited about tonight. I'm excited every week. And I did have a tragedy tonight, but I'm all right now. I spilled my Route 44 Diet peach tea all over me. So I'm sitting here with my shorts wet, like that I had a urinary thing. So I have been accused, Vince, of people saying to me that they have heard me fart on the show, pee on the show, go to the bathroom number 2 on the show, and all kinds of other things, bodily functions. And I'm in a little control room, in a newsroom, actually. I'm in a newsroom. And so I did spill my Sonic and my shorts are wet, but so be it. Vince Russo.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all that with me.
You need to know the background. No, you don't. You need to know the background to know my mood. Yeah. Because you know me, man. I'm hard to work with. I can be very challenging to deal with, as you well know.
Yeah, but I feel much more comfortable and much more at ease now that I know about your day and I know that you wet yourself. And, I'm ready to continue on. Good,
yes. And I'm not ashamed, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not ashamed of what happened. The website is pyroandballyhoo.com.
JR, you know what's so funny about that? And I hate to interrupt you, but when you say pyroandballyhoo.com, you know what's so funny about that? You and I, have seen so many wrestling formats where the first item is Pyro and Ballyhoo, and we've, I know I saw it, for every week I was at the WWE. So, when I named my website pyroandballyhoo.com, I'm just assuming that everybody knows what Pyro and Ballyhoo means.
Yeah, all right.
So, we knew it. It was a way of life for us. So, at the beginning, so many people, what's Pyro and Ballyhoo? What's Pyro and Ballyhoo? And, then it realized, God, that's a wrestling term. Of course they don't know what it means,
Well, it's not as well known as the gorilla position.
Right, exactly. But you know who was the inventor of Pyro and Ballyhoo on the formats of the shows? You know who invented that?
Kerwin Silfies or Howard Finkel.
All the attributes go to Mr. Kerwin.
Kerwin Silfies, yeah.
Yes, that was his baby. I don't claim it as my own. That was passed down by Kerwin, and I carried that through my whole professional career.
I want to get few things out of the way here because this is going to be a really good show. We got a lot of material to talk about. and I'm anxious to get your feedback, your thoughts on. I'm curious. But lately, you've been implicated, fairly or not, by the way, in the issues that TNA are currently having with Spike Television. Now, as we tape this, those issues are, as I understand it, I might be wrong, that Spike is not going to renew TNA Impact when the contract is up, and then you are being implicated as being a culprit in that issue, that mood or whatever. How do you respond to all this stuff?
Well, JR, unfortunately, I'm not at liberty to talk about that right now, so there's not much I can say. But, I will say this. When and if the time comes, when I do have the opportunity to discuss it, I most certainly will. And, even, coming back on your show and having that opportunity. But, right now I'm just not at liberty to discuss it. And I hate to say that because I hate when people say that. But I'm not, so I can't.
I bet you would like to have an opportunity to say something, though.
I would, and like I said, when and if that opportunity arises, I mean, you know me, JR. I'll be there.
Yeah.
I'll be there for the bell. But just right now, I'm not at liberty.
All right, I understand. I read that you are not well liked at Spike TV. Just as an aside, that in general you're not well liked at Spike TV. Is that even remotely true, or is there any credence to that tale?
Well, again, JR, I hate to plead the fifth, but, again, something I'm not at liberty to speak about. But, again, when and if that opportunity arises, if anybody knows Vince Russo, they know he'll be speaking about it.
Okay.
But, for the time being right now, that's just also another subject that I just can't hit on.
Okay. I'm 0 for 2, ladies and gentlemen, but here I'm still hanging the game. We got 9 innings here. We're just getting started.
I promise you, JR, outside of those 2 questions, there should be nothing that I shouldn't be able to shoot straight with you for the rest of the night.
I know there shouldn't be, but I may have a trick up my sleeve.
We'll see.
Okay. And this is crazy because I saw this on. I couldn't believe this. I had to read this twice. It's so absurd. But nonetheless, I read this, that Vince Russo has been accused of killing 2 companies and, according to a recent Smith-Hart tweet, of murdering Owen Hart. You can't escape this stuff. Now I'm bringing it up again. So how do you handle, he's killed 2 wrestling companies and my brother? Well,
JR, I got to tell you, the 2 wrestling companies is an absolute joke. So, that part of it is comical. Anybody that knows the situation with WCW or that knows the situation with TNA, to point the finger at me as the scapegoat, that's comedy to me. I mean, it really is. But, when you talk about Owen, and this is a guy, JR, that, man, you and I, you more than me, JR, because you worked in WCW long before WWE. JR, of the thousands and thousands of personalities that I worked with, Owen Hart was probably up there in the top 1 or 2 as my favorite person that I ever worked with. So when anything like that is said about Owen, that's not funny to me. And honestly, JR, those remarks break my heart because I loved Owen. I mean, and I don't say that now because he's not here. This was perhaps one of the greatest human beings I may have, ever met in my life. And JR, I hate to bring this up on your show, but I will because it's your show, and I probably wouldn't say it on any other show. But, JR, let's face it, there's a good amount of, wrestlers, that don't tend to stay faithful, on the road. That's the nature of the beast. Owen Hart was probably one of 3 guys that was faithful, to his wife on the road and was faithful to his family and was such a stand-up friend, husband, father, and anybody who crossed paths with Owen loved him. And when something like that is brought up, that's no joke to me. I take that very, very seriously. And obviously Owen's death was a tragedy. JR, I don't even know if because I talked about this recently, with Steve on his podcast, and he didn't know this. JR, do you know the how it came about that the rappel got written into the show that night?
No, I have no idea.
So and this is JR, why I really believe in destiny, and I believe there's an end date for all of us. I mean, I do believe that wholeheartedly. But in Owen's case, JR, what happened was I was in my office. It was probably, I think it was probably about late Thursday afternoon. I've got the pay-per-view in front of me. I'm dotting the I's and I'm crossing the T's, okay? All of a sudden, I get a call from Steve Taylor, who was the director of building operations, while I'm working on the show.
Yeah.
So Steve says to me, he goes, Vince, the riggers from WCW who repel Sting are coming to the pay-per-view in Kansas City. Is there anything we can write into the show so they can show us, what they can do, for the WWE as far as, repelling, our guys, much like they do Sting? So, JR, I look at my format, and I go up and down my format, and, I see, wait a minute, Owen's on the show as the Blue Blazer. So now I'm thinking, man, what a tremendous, entrance that would be for Owen, to be, repelled, come in as a superhero. It would be great for Owen. So I looked at his format and I said, well, Steve, Owen's going to be the Blue Blazer. It would probably be good for him, give him a spectacular entrance. How about Owen? And that's how it got put in the show, JR.
Wow.
So when the show was originally written, JR, it wasn't in there. It was never discussed. It by all means, it wasn't pertinent to the show. It didn't matter whether we did it or not. It didn't matter. I was just trying to find a spot for Steve, so the WCW guys can show what they could do. And I'll even go one step further, JR, because over the years I've heard the story. Owen didn't want to do it. Owen felt uncomfortable. Owen this, Owen that. I've heard that over the years. JR, I could tell you that night, prior to the show starting, I remember this like it was yesterday. I saw Owen. He was in his, I think it was an orange jumpsuit, because he had just rehearsed it. And he was getting a cup of coffee. And I said, Owen, how did rehearsal go? And Owen said, oh, Vince, no problem. Everything was great. He goes, I only have one favor to ask you. And I said, what's that, Owen? And JR, the way we originally had it laid out, he was facing the Godfather, and the Godfather was going to go to the ring first, and then Owen was going to be repelled.
Right.
So Owen said to me, Vince, the only thing I ask is, can I be repelled first? And can my entrance be first? Because if I'm second, I'm going to be there like a piñata until I unhook myself, and the Godfather should be able to pummel me. And I said, yeah. I said, absolutely, Owen. I said, that makes all the sense in the world. I said, we'll switch the entrances, and that's that. I mean, it was as simple as that.
Yeah.
But there was never, well, Vince, I'm afraid of this. I mean, through going over rehearsals, I felt there was none of that, Joe. If Owen would have balked about that at all, it never would have happened. It wasn't pertinent or important to the show.
Right.
And that's why, Joe, when, and Smith Hart wasn't the only one who has said that. Jeanette has said that. Roddy Piper has said that. And that's not a joke to me. And, at the end of the day, everybody pays for their sins. And, I'm not going to deal with, Piper and Cornette and Smith for saying those things. but they're going to have to meet with a power much higher than me. But that's the way that day played out. And like I said, I don't think there was anything any of us could have done. I think, like I said, I think there's an end date for all of us, and that's in my heart of hearts. That's what I believe.
But that's good information. To me, that clears up a lot of things that people have wondered about. So, and we're starting off the show. So we got that out of the way. Hey, because she's in the news a lot, do people, the general John Q. public, do you believe they have a wrong impression of Dixie Carter? Or maybe I should ask a better question, like, what was your relationship like, or how would you describe Dixie Carter to a stranger?
I mean, honestly, JR, and this is what stands out about Dixie, especially in the wrestling business, and you could appreciate this. The sweetest, kindest, honest, most caring individual I had ever been associated with in the wrestling business by far. And JR, that description of somebody in the wrestling business is few and far between.
I never heard it used before like that. So it's the first for me.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And JR, here's the thing about it too. And again, just shooting totally straight with you. I was working with TNA for well over 10 years. That person never changed. She was always that person, and regardless, 5 years in, a decade in, Dixie was always that human being. You and I, we had the privilege of having opportunities to work with Vince McMahon one-on-one.
Right.
When there was nobody else in the room, and it was just you and Vince. And I had many of those opportunities with Dixie. And those are the times that I'll always remember, more than anything. Because as a human being, one-on-one, she had the biggest heart of anybody I ever met in the business.
I think a piece of business advice, you always try to leave something behind on these shows. Business advice, when you're talking to someone about a business deal or a raise or any promotion, whatever it may be, anytime you can meet with a decision maker by yourself, you value that time, plan for that time, you maximize those minutes, and because they're just not going to happen all the time, and sometimes just having one person other than yourself in the room could change the whole dynamic. And my take on Vince McMahon is, and this doesn't make him a bad person, but he's not the same person with three people in the room as he is with himself and one other person in the room, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, JR, we both saw that guy, and you're absolutely right. And, you see Vince, and you have an opinion of Vince, and you have a feeling for Vince. But when you get him one-on-one, and that guard is down, and Vince McMahon becomes the regular guy, man, the greatest guy in the world. And I try to tell that to people, and you've had those same experiences, but because of who he is and what he represents, nobody can really understand that. I mean, you had to experience that, and yes, JR, I think both you and I were very lucky that we did have that opportunity.
Yeah, it's great to work with a genius and a visionary, because unless you're, Gomer Pyle, USMC, you're going to pay attention, and some of it's going to rub off. Would you say that, when we were talking, that you were in WWE less than 5 years?
Yes.
Do you consider the 5 years in WWE, comparing the three companies you're with, your best run, your middle run, your, the least favorite? Where does it fit?
There's no comparison. I know there'll never be another time in my life like this. But JR, it's safe for me to say, I don't think there'll ever be another time like that ever again in the wrestling business. Because at the end of the day, every star aligned. Every star. Everybody in key positions at that company at that time were not only the best in the business, but on top of their game. And I'm talking about everybody. I'm not just talking about talent, and that includes talent, of course, but I'm talking about, JR, from you in talent relations to the writing, to the Kevin Dunn, to the David Zahatis with the packages. Everybody was at a peak performance at the same time. And it was magic, and it was meant to be. And after that, it was never, ever like that for me again, not even close. So, that answer to me is a no-brainer. But, man, there's no doubt in my mind there was a light shining on us.
Well, I'd like for it to happen again because it would mean that the overall business would be healthier than it is today. So I'd like for that to happen, but I'm like you. All the stars have to align. Everybody's got to understand the players that were involved in that whole Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars.
Well, Joe, there were two things, and I hate to interrupt you, but I want to point it out because one of them concerned you, okay? First of all, I'm going to get to the one that concerned me. That worked so well at that time from a writing perspective, JR, because it was me and Ed Ferrara. Two guys sitting in a room looking at each other eye to eye. Ed was from Jersey. I was from Long Island. We were both Italian from the neighborhood. We were both on the same page. So there was clearly one vision. Well, fast forward to 2014, and you have 30 writers working for the WWE. You're never going to have that again. You're never going to have that type of a show because there's far too many cooks in the kitchen. So the structure has changed. That's number one, why it will never happen again. And here's number two, JR, and every time I talk about my career, you get brought up, and everybody on the roster at that time during the Attitude Era deserved to be there. They were all pros. They were all at the top of their game. Me and Ed were able to use every single person on the roster knowing they would hit the ball out of the park. And that was, you put the roster together, and you put the team together. You gave us the list of players and said, here you go, guys. When we got that list from you, we knew, okay, this is the cream of the crop. If we don't get these guys over now, it's on us. It's our fault because they're here because they deserve to be. JR, when I went on to WCW and TNA, I can tell you at least 35% of the guys on the roster had no business being on the roster.
Wow.
And you could have had, JR, you could have had Shakespeare writing for them. It wouldn't have mattered. They weren't ready for the spot. They weren't ready for the stage. They were never going to get over. But yet, Ed and I at WCW and me later at TNA, I had to give my best effort to get them over. But it wasn't the roster that should have been assembled. And JR, again, that is to your credit, and I don't know if anybody is capable of repeating the mastery of putting a team like that together again.
Well, thanks. We got lucky and had a real good staff, and like you said, it was a real total team effort. Everybody in their departments were working on all cylinders, as you mentioned, and we all had a common goal. The thing about then, philosophies are philosophies. I always believed that, I always prided myself in the fact that I went through so many different eras of television pro wrestling that I had to change my style and my presentation on more than one occasion and keep reinventing myself. If I had a druther and a preference, I liked physicality, I liked intense personal issues, and I liked, a little bit of the Wild West was kind of my thing. But I wanted to I liked the play-by-play. I liked that better than being a quote-unquote storyteller, because I think it eliminates some of the sensational athletic things that these guys and gals are doing you miss some of the drama. I think pro wrestling is better suited for drama events than it is for comedy. That's just me, though.
Well, JR, you know what's real interesting about that, and I'm glad you brought it up. Because JR, like, it's like you said today. Okay, the WWE has 30 writers. I don't know where these 30 writers are from. I know they're not from have a wrestling background. I mean, I know that.
That's a number. By the way, that's a number that I heard. I don't know that it's accurate, but I know that department is mighty big. The department being 30.
And the point is, JR, I love the fact when I look back at my career and I look at the creative minds that I worked with, and the diversity, and the different territories, and I worked with Bill Watts. Okay, I worked with you. I worked with Jim Cornette. I worked with Eric Bischoff with his AWA background. I worked with Jerry Jarrett. I worked with Vince McMahon. I had the ability to work with all these people with different backgrounds and different philosophies, and I think it's fair for me to say that I a little from each. I listened, I learned, and there were some things I incorporated into, my style. But the unfortunate thing with me is, and you just hit the nail on the head, people thinking, you got to have Vince Russo on your show, you're going to argue. JR, the one thing that, just boggled my mind is some of those people that I mentioned, and more than one, I'm not just talking about Jim Cornette, but some of those people that I mentioned, hate me and have a disdain for me and don't like me because of my brand and my philosophy of professional wrestling. My philosophy of professional wrestling is the way it is because I was raised on Vince McMahon Sr. That's the product I saw growing up in New York. I saw the WWF. So that's what I knew. And in the business, when you work with these people and, you have different backgrounds and different philosophies, for people to take that to a personal level, I always thought that was absolutely ridiculous because at the end of the day, with so much knowledge, we should all be learning from each other.
Yeah, I agree. But wrestling, ex-wrestling promoters and wrestling lifers, and I'm one of those guys. But my philosophy is because of how I was brought up in the business, and Watts at least gave me a pretty good education. Mm-hmm. So, look, I backed into the business. I didn't have family in it. I wasn't an outstanding athlete. I came in the back door backwards. So I thought, well, every year is going to be, I want to be maybe one more. If I make one more year in the wrestling business, I'm going to be good. Well, then 40 years later, I'm still doing some form of this stuff, right? So
right.
I think we have to learn and we have to survive. And those wrestling promoters are the same guys that blame Vince for the failure of their territories.
Right.
And I say, you're doo-dooing on me here. You got to be kidding. You're the guy that didn't want to use radio. You're the guy that didn't want to use TV spots outside your television vehicle. You're the guy that didn't want to send any pictures to the newspaper to get captioned for your event. You didn't want to use any electronic marketing or any electronic media. You didn't want to do any of those things because, well, we hadn't done that before. So I look at those guys. If you're on the crap list of some promoters, I would probably, like you have, I would lose no sleep over that deal because they're very good at passing the buck, love to take credit when it's somebody else's idea, and they love to pass the heat when they fail. That's just my take on that deal. So I'm with you on that.
J.R., my whole philosophy was this, and my philosophy was this simple. Do whatever you have to do in the course of those 2 hours to get as many eyeballs watching your product as possible. End of story, period. You had a 2-hour window to do whatever you had to do to get as many people to watch, because the more people that watch your show, and I'm preaching to the choir, JR, ticket sales, merchandise, pay-per-view buys, everything revolves around that audience on Monday night. And that's why, whatever we had to do, good, bad, or indifferent, the goal was to get as many people to watch the show as possible. And that's all we tried to do on a weekly basis.
Well, with that said, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you, how do the people in the wrestling business today get more eyeballs in front of their television sets and increase the audience? And we'll do that after we take this very quick timeout. Back with Vince Russo, we're talking about a lot of things in the business, a lot more to come, and we're talking about his primary goal was to get as many people watching the program in any manner that he could, because eyeballs meant dollars, and there's a lot to be said about that. And looking at the television audience today, what do you think it's going to take to get people fired up about the genre again? Because I just don't have the feeling that the pro wrestling is cool right now.
Well, JR, it's got to begin and end with, the WWF. And, that's not a shun on TNA, but, that's the big dog. So I'm going to use that as an example. And it's funny, your choice of words there, JR, like you said to me, wrestling doesn't seem cool right now. The first thought that comes to my mind is, how could anything be cool that's 3 hours long? The way society is today and the way people are wired today, you're going to bore the heck out of some people, a lot of people, within the course of 3 hours.
Yep.
That right there, to me, is the biggest problem. But, JR, like you, I understand business. I understand USA Network, gave WWE more money to go from 2 hours to 3 hours, but it's painfully obvious that when you sit down and watch a Raw, everything is stretched out and goes way longer than it really should have went in an effort for them to fill 3 hours. The easiest way for me to explain it to you, JR, is when we were writing the Attitude Era, and I'm not kidding you, thank God we were head-to-head with Nitro. Because when Ed and I would sit down and write the show, we'd sit down and write the show like the viewer at home was sitting there with the remote control in his hand,
Yep.
begging you to give him the opportunity to turn over to Nitro. That's how we wrote the show. When I sit there on a Monday night and I watch the show, I can't tell you how many opportunities there are to flip the channel because there's nothing going on. JR, do you know that entire Attitude Era, there wasn't one match that went through a commercial break? Every match was in a segment, and when the segment was over, the match was over, then we went to commercial? And now you're going to give me a 17-minute match with 2 commercial breaks, and you're going to expect me not to change the channel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
The attention span is so short today. You gotta stick and move, stick and move, stick and move. You're not going to get people to sit around and watch that for that length of time. It's not going to happen in 2014.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a long show. There's 15 commercial breaks. Here's what gets me. I still believe, shame on me if I'm wrong, that people tune in to a wrestling show to primarily, but not exclusively, watch wrestling or the physicality involved in the presentation of wrestling. Not to hear bad actors act and unfunny people do comedy.
Well, and JR, I don't disagree with that. My disagreement would come here. Back in the day, JR, when SummerSlam's coming up.
That was a slick plug.
So say we had 10 matches on SummerSlam. Ed and I would sit there, getting ready to write the show. We'd have all 10 matches written down, and we would make sure within the body of the wrestling show that all 10 matches were covered. Every single one of them, from the main event to the first match. And that was, like I said to you, hit and move, hit and move, hit and move, hit and move. So, yes, I agree with you on the action and the wrestling, but I also believe that, again, going back to the attention span, I also feel if they were shorter matches, that ended prior to commercial, and there were more of them, I think the matches would tend to be more exciting, and I think it would tend to hold the audience more. To me, it's when they drag it out, I just think they're losing people along the way.
Well, okay, here's my point on that deal. The issue about the shorter matches. A lot of people don't realize, not saying you're one of them, but a lot of people don't realize that the ability to wrestle a short match and tell a compelling story that actually moves the needle on one of these two competitors is very challenging. You've got to find the right time. In other words, to tell two green guys, you guys got to go 2 segments, you're going to go 18 minutes. Bad booking. Secondly, to tell them, go out and tell me a great story, and bell to bell, you've got about 2 to 3 minutes. Bad booking. There's got to be, you got to look at the skill set of the individual in the match, and what do they need, really in reality, because they're all going to try to bleed you for more time because they want to be on TV longer. What do they need to tell the message that you are trying to accomplish through your writing? If they aren't given that, if that time's not addressed and that matter's not addressed, then what you're writing is for naught, because it's not going to get over.
Definitely 100% agreed. And, and again, it does come down to the individual. But Jay, there's something else you have to look at. I mean, honestly, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, but the announcing is a big part of that. And yes, wrestlers can only tell so much of a story in 3 or 4 minutes, but when you have the right announcers out there that understand the story you're trying to get across, the announcers are going to help the talent in telling that story. So, I agree with you. I think it depends on the talent, but I really think, my biggest pet peeve is when you go to a commercial break during a match, I think no matter what, you're going to lose audience. And I compare it, JR, to boxing. I compare it to MMA. In the middle of a round, are they going to go to a commercial break? That's a huge issue, and I don't think that would be an issue if the show wasn't 3 hours long.
When you look back at that Attitude Era, do you believe, do you have any favorite program? I have a favorite program. I thought McMahon and Austin were perfect. I thought it was a perfect symphony. Vince loved being a heel. He loved it. And Austin loved being Austin. So, man, all of a sudden, boy, what a casting that was. We had there was never, I don't believe, a better rivalry in WWE than those two.
That's what I mean, JR. I mean, I know, you have a super close relationship, with Steve and know him better than anybody. But that's what I'm talking about, JR. I mean, in our lifetime, are we ever going to see two people as gifted as they were, working together at the same place and at the same time, and the chemistry, just through the roof? I can't see that repeating itself. I mean, I just can, and that's why, a lot of people like to take the pop shots at me and say, oh, you like to take credit for the Attitude Era. And are you nuts? Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, and like you said, that chemistry, that was out of this world. That's not going to happen again. And to me, JR, the thing I liked the most, and I thought was the best thing we'd done, and it was really from a writing perspective. So that's why it was a little different. And there's a little, something in the story that's a little funny, but when we turn Rock heel to join the corporation.
Yeah.
And the reason why I enjoyed that so much, Jim, is like we knew months in advance. We started telling the story months in advance. And there were little intricacies in each week where we were building this story. And here's the funniest thing in the world, Jim. You want to talk about guys being over, okay? Well, we were about maybe 2 weeks away from the big turn at the pay-per-view, and about 2 weeks away, Rock had an in-ring with Vince, and at the end of the in-ring, Rock dropped the people's elbow on Vince. Now, that night with that crowd, you know, JR, you would have thought that Rock shot Vince McMahon with a shotgun.
Yeah.
You would have thought that he killed Vince McMahon. And the beauty of it was, you know, Ed and I were looking at each other, you know, from a story writing point of view, and we said, he just dropped an elbow on him. That's all he did. That's why they were able to be in cahoots, and that's why it was all a work, because all Rock ever did was drop an elbow on Vince.
Yeah.
But Rock was so over that the elbow was like a shotgun to the head. And again, that's why I say I can't see that happening again.
No, it was. It's just you can't replicate that kind of talent. I get questions on Twitter. I'm sure you do too. You know, who's the next Stone Cold? Who said? Somebody asked me the other day, is Bray Wyatt the next Undertaker? My answer. Well, sometimes I'm too curt. Sometimes I'm too short with them. But no, you better hope he's not the next Undertaker, and there won't be another Undertaker. All you need to worry about is, will Bray Wyatt be the first Bray Wyatt? Because he just needs to be something different. He needs to be himself, embellished, and he's one of the more compelling characters. I know you like him. I like him. Here's what confuses me. WWE gives Bray Wyatt babyface tools to work with at times, and he's cast still in their fictional play as a villain, and that confuses me at times. Don't make me feel indifferent. Don't make me say, well, I know he's a bad guy, but he's kind of cool. He's kind of...
Joe, let me ask you something right there. Why is it bad to make you feel indifferent?
I don't know if I think I feel better about enjoying the process if I have a definitive emotion of either I like the guy or I don't like the guy.
Yeah. Well, here's what my take is on that. It's two things. Number one, I've always said, like, this is my philosophy, Vince Russo, and it goes back to, JR, what I told you earlier about the eyeballs on the television show. Mm-hmm. How many people can you get to watch? So with that philosophy, my theory always was, listen, I don't care if you cheer, I don't care if you boo,
right.
All I care is that you react. Whether Bray Wyatt is a babyface or a heel, will people pay money to see him? Period. That's what's important to me. Now, here's the problem, JR. The problem is society. The problem isn't, with Bray Wyatt or the writers. The problem is Bray Wyatt is a heel, but as a heel and a bad guy, some of the things he does are cool. And in 2014, being bad sometimes means being good. So, they've given him all these tools, and they've tried to paint him as a heel. But I mean, let's face it, some of the stuff that the guy goes out and does is pretty cool in 2014.
I agree.
So that's why I guess at the end of the day, what I'm looking at is, would I pay money to go see Bray Wyatt? To me, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. No, I see that. Give me just a Reader's Digest first. And when you went to WCW, when you left WWE, and you and Ed went with you, right?
Yeah.
You and Ed went to WCW. Mm-hmm. Give me a little short grocery list of things that you noticed that were way different, and maybe not in a good way, or maybe in a good way, from WWE.
There was nothing in a good way different. Nothing. Everything was different in a bad way. I'll try to tell you as condensed as I can. The biggest thing, JR, is when I was in the WWE, and I was successful as a writer. Okay, I had the protection of Vince McMahon. At the end of the day, if you screwed with Vince Russo and tried to play politics with Vince Russo or tried to work Vince Russo out of his spot, okay, it was impossible because Vince McMahon had my back. And with Vince having my back, JR, that enabled me to concentrate 1,000% on the show and not have to worry about backstage politics. Because it was like, if you screwed with me, you screwed with Vince. So that gave me the ability to zero in on the show every single week. The day I walked in that locker room at WCW, there was a target on my back. I had no protection. I was open game. And, JR, I went in there with the philosophy of, we have to start getting these younger mid-card guys at the time over. We got to start moving these guys into the spotlight. They still had Hogan and Flair up top, when I went there, and the guys underneath at that time, I'm talking about, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio. These were guys underneath that weren't getting the opportunity to play the main stage because of the politics.
Yeah.
So I walked in there and I'm like, we got to get these guys on the main stage. And when the veterans knew that was my game plan, I was dead in the water, and not having a Vince there and not having the protection there so I could just concentrate on the matter at hand, I was dead in the water from day one, and that's exactly what happened.
How do you feel you would have done if you had been provided more time on that go-around?
Well, JR, I'm glad you brought that up because, again, I was the one who killed WCW, okay? Here are the facts, JR, and here are the numbers because I'm a numbers guy. It's not, I always say in this business, JR, it's not about anybody's opinion. Everybody's opinion does not matter. It's not who you like and who you want to push and who you have heat with. All that means nothing. All that matters is who is delivering the number. What are the facts? Who are they watching? That's all that matters. So I'll never forget it, JR. Ed and I went into WCW. The last show before we went in, Chris Benoit and Bret Hart had like a memorial match for Owen. And it was like a 3-segment match with perhaps the 2 greatest workers in the history of professional wrestling. Mm-hmm. That show, JR, the week before Ed and I came in, and anybody can go back and look, obviously I'd be an idiot to be making up these numbers, that show did a 2.6, okay? Ed and I came in, and within 3 months, we got the show was up to a 3.5, okay? Mm-hmm. Then the politics kicked in. They told me they were going in another direction, even though we gone from a 2.6 to a 3.5 in 3 months, and they wanted to go in another direction. And I said, okay, no problem, goodbye. I went home, JR, for 3 months. In that 3 months, they went right back down to a 2.6. Now, when they called me back, JR, I knew we're not getting the audience back. We had them. We went from a 2.6 to a 3.5 in 3 months. We had them. Over the next 3 months, you went in a completely different direction. You went back down to the 2.5. We're not getting them back. And I knew that. I did everything I possibly could, but at that time, we did have lost all trust and all confidence in the product because of the changes, and there was no getting them back at that point.
Was that the run you got on? You were in your second time there. Your second time there was your last time there, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, so the second time you were there, what compelled you to add performer to your list of duties as the architect of the creative side of writing this show?
JR, it's real simple because I just gave you the number game. I told you where we were at and what we went to, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of twofold. Okay, number one, I came back with Eric Bischoff, okay? And, you know, he suggested I be on the show, okay? Number two, JR, we had dug such a hole for us at that time, you know, going from a 3.5 right back to a 2.5. JR, I don't want to sound cocky or arrogant or anything like that, but I told you earlier in the conversation, like, probably 35% of that roster didn't deserve to be on the roster.
Yep.
So my mindset was, JR, okay, we've lost the audience. We're right back down to a 2.5. My philosophy was, you know what? If this is going to be on me, and if this is going to be on my shoulders, I will go out there and do it myself, because I knew I had the passion to draw more heat and a higher number than probably half of the WCW roster at the time. Because at that point, JR, there were a lot of people that did not care. I always cared because it was my pride and it was my name on that show. And with the passion I had, I was like, you know what? I'll go out there and do this. I'll draw heat. If they're going to put this on me, then it's going to go down on me. I'm not going to depend on anybody else to pull me down, and that was a big part of the decision.
Yeah. So obviously you don't have any second thoughts or regrets that you went through that phase.
Well, I got two regrets, JR. I'll tell you what they are. First of all, I got hurt, and I suffered post-concussion syndrome. It still affects me to this day. 15 years ago, my mind is not the same. You know, from various concussions during that time. You know, so like that, you know, that's a big regret I have as far as health conditions. Here's the second regret, JR. The reason why Vince Russo is hated so much in the internet wrestling community is because the character I portrayed on television, they bought into that's who I really was. They believed I was that arrogant a-hole from New York, and they hated me because of it. Meanwhile, all I was doing was, you know, JR, every great performer does this, including Austin. All I was doing, JR, was taking my personality and magnifying it 1,000 times over.
Sure.
That's all I was doing. That was not me. But they bought into the cocky, arrogant New Yorker because they wanted to buy into it, and from that moment on, for the rest of my career, I had all this heat, and I was so hated. And the funny thing was, nobody hated me when I was writing for the WWE. They knew there was a Vince Russo writing the show. Nobody hated me. Well, they didn't hate me because they never saw me. Right. And they still never saw me. What they saw was my character, and they bought into it.
Got it.
So, you know, the combination of those two things, you know, really changed my life a lot.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. I was looking at my phone the other day, and my high-dollar iPhone on my contacts, and I ran across it getting the ABCD. Dr. Death. Still got Dr. Death's number in my cell phone.
Yeah.
And so I every week, every other week, regularly, I will say, did you get mad at Dr. Death when he played Oklahoma's bodyguard in WCW? And I said, well, of course not. I said he was cast in a role in another TV show. His character was not utilized in the WWE TV show any longer. After he got hurt in the brawl for it all, he had to have quad surgery. Major deal, major surgery. Mm-hmm. He probably should have went home, but he couldn't afford to. But I gave the eulogy at his funeral. So would that speak of my anger? Of course not. I loved him. So I would be remiss if I didn't ask, because somebody's going to say, why didn't you have the balls, JR, to ask Russo about the Oklahoma character? Man, I heard about the characterization of me from all fronts. It was really, so it worked.
Well, you know what, JR? It wasn't a matter of, like, it working, because I can tell you right now, it wasn't thought out that way. You know, so it wasn't like this well-thought-out plan. JR, you have to, and of course, you know, I've apologized to you years ago. I've made this my blanket statement, and I'll say it to nauseum. When people ask me, what do you regret, Vince? Do you regret the David Arquette No, I don't regret any of that stuff. The one thing I do regret that I wish I never did, and I take responsibility for it, not Ed Ferrara, you know, it was on my dime, was the Oklahoma character. Now, JR, I'm not going to sit here and justify anything. There is no justification. I was a different guy at the time. I wish I would have never done it. I look back, I can't believe that I did it, but just to let you know of my mindset, you know, at that time. JR, you gotta realize the breaking point of me leaving the WWE was when I went into Vince McMahon's office. Okay, JR, we just started SmackDown. Okay, so now all of a sudden, you know, here's Ed and I putting every ounce of blood, sweat, and tear we have in Raw, and now we're told, okay, now you guys got to do that twice a week.
Right.
No new writers were brought in. There was no increase in pay, which wouldn't have mattered anyway. It was the load, because we were very prideful of our work. We wanted everything to be the best. So at that point, JR, it became overwhelming for me. And I'll never forget, I went in Vince's office, and the absolute breaking point was I started crying in his office, JR. I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And what it came down to was I said, listen, Vince, you've added a new show. I don't see my family as it is. At the time, I had 3 small kids, JR, and my wife, you know, moved to Connecticut for me, so her family was nowhere around. So I said to Vince, Vince, I want my wife to be able to move closer to her family because I'm never home. I'm not there. I don't want to leave her here alone. So he looked me in the eye, as serious as could be, and he said to me, he goes, Vince, he goes, I don't see what the problem is. You know, I pay you enough money now, you should be able to get a nanny to watch your kids. When he said that to me, JR, being a prideful Italian guy, that was it. Our relationship was over right then and there. And all I had in my mind when I went to WCW were those words. And how cold and callous, and, you know, Vince not giving a crap about me or my family at the end of the day, after giving him 5 years of my life on a silver platter. And I went into WCW, you know, the expression full of piss and vinegar, and it was gloves off, and it was anything goes. That was my mentality.
Yeah.
And part of that anything goes, you know, included Oklahoma, when unfortunately Jim Ross had nothing to do with, you know, Vince McMahon saying that to me.
Right.
Nothing at all. I never had a crossword with Jim Ross. I didn't have any heat with Jim Ross, but I was sent so over the edge by Vince McMahon that it was like, okay, anything goes. I'm pulling out every stop here, and I'm going to shove it up your backside for making that comment to me. And that was my mindset. And, JR, I'll never forget, you know, at around the same time, you know, a couple of months later, I was doing an angle, right? And I actually went in the back, JR, and I asked Kevin Nash to cut me. That's how far in it I was.
Wow.
And when those words came out of my mouth, asking Kevin to cut me, once those words came out of my mouth, that kind of stopped me dead in my tracks. And that was kind of like what on earth are you doing? But at that point in time, that's how driven I was. That's how much it was for me to make WCW successful and say to Vince McMahon, the next time you crap on me and my family, you're going to think twice about it. And, and again, looking back now, I'm ashamed. I'm sadful. Obviously, I can't take it back. It's a regret. There's no justification. That's where my mind was at the time.
I'm going to have a Ferrari on here, and when he comes on, I'm going to say, Ed, I had Vince on a few weeks ago, and he blamed that whole Oklahoma thing on you. So
you should.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what the hell what did I do to you to make you so angry?
Ed always tries to take the heat for it, and I said, no, Ed, there's no heat. I was in charge. I told you to do it. You did it. It had nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
But that happens in a lot of cases,
You're right. Another question. Why do you think John Cena is so polarizing?
When I read all about this Cena heat, I just wrote a column on Pyro and Ballyhoo just about a month. It was right after Money in the Bank. And the name of the article was, when did John Cena become the booker? Everybody blames John Cena for, you're out there too long, you're cutting the same promo, they should have turned you heel months ago. John Cena is not writing the television. John Cena is a paid performer that's going out there and doing what they're telling him to do. So if you think John Cena should have turned babyface or John Cena's, act is stale, that's not John Cena's fault. That's the people giving him the material. In my opinion, two things. Number one, he should have turned heel a long time ago. I don't understand why he hasn't. I don't get it. I don't know the discussions they have there. He has overstayed his welcome as a babyface, and it has nothing to do with him because he's not writing the scripts. I'll tell you what I love about him. Being in the position that Cena's in, JR, he goes to different arenas around the country, and the fans are going to be different in every single arena. And when John goes out there and cuts the promo, he's really not going to know what kind of response he gets in St. Louis compared to Dallas, compared to New York. He doesn't really know what the response is going to be until he starts talking and listens to the people. And the thing that I think is fascinating about him is no matter what their reaction is, he works with it. He takes their reaction and he makes it work for him. Yeah. And, man, I got to tell you, people don't realize that because a lot of people don't understand the writing aspect of it or the performer aspect of it. But, JR, there aren't many people that would be able to do that. JR, a lot of these guys are given scripts and verbiage, and they go out to that ring and they could only cut it one way.
Yeah, not good. It's not good.
Yeah, Cena says one sentence. He listens to what the response is going to be tonight, and then he alters his delivery to that. Man, that is hard to do, and that's why I respect that guy more than anything because I do believe there's been holes in his story that he has nothing to do with, but he has done everything in his power to make it work.
So you think that turning him heel would freshen up the character, a nice heel run of some significance, and then when he finally went back, was made whole again, he might even be bigger than he is now?
Absolutely, and I just hope they don't wait to the point of it being too late. Yeah. It's almost like, JR, when the NWO had their run, and it was, probably the hottest thing I've ever seen in my lifetime. Well, they let it go on and on and on and on until it meant absolutely nothing. And I just hope they're intelligent enough to not do that same thing with Cena.
I agree. On that deal, let me ask this question. Would it be easier from someone that's written a lot of TV for WWE to do a 1 hour show? For me here in Oklahoma, that's 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time. And then Monday Night Raw would start as we knew it, and we loved it over the years, from that 8 to 10 Central or 9 to 11 Eastern Time. Is it easier to write a 1 hour show that would lead you into your 2 hour show, or am I? Is it just 6 for one, half dozen the other, and just doing one real long show?
Well, I think they would have to be two different shows, JR. Now, here's an idea. Why not put NXT on for an hour and then follow that with Raw? Now that would be much more interesting to me, to see the minor league first and then to see the major league next. Mm-hmm. Now, to me, that definitely would break up that 3-hour window.
Yeah.
So I think you would need two different shows.
I got you. Okay. Yeses and nos when you can. Did you think Undertaker's streak ending in WrestleMania 30 was good or bad? Yes or no?
Joe, I don't have an opinion of it because I don't know the circumstances. I don't know if Taker's. I don't know how his body is. I don't know if he can't go any longer. I don't know what the circumstances were, so it's difficult for me to comment on that.
The decision, by the way, was made 4 hours before showtime. So that's for what that's worth. Do you think that live touring may become obsolete for pro wrestling companies, or is it always going to be there because it's a necessity?
I think it's always going to be there because I think there's always going to be a new generation of fans. And as long as they have the over-the-top characters and the entertainment aspect, the kids are always going to drag their parents to the show. So as long as they continue to, do it the way they're doing it, I think there's always going to be an audience for it.
Gotcha. All right. I think so, too. As long as you keep tickets fairly priced and you don't play the market too often and you give them good shows. So do you believe that any talent should have creative control and veto power?
No. You don't even have to go any further. I don't care who it is. That's the death knell.
Kiss of death.
Kiss of death. Kiss of death. I don't want to comment on it because I don't want to get myself in trouble.
No,
Kiss of death. I don't care who it is.
I know, brother.
Yeah, I love Bray to death. I'm almost a little fruitsy tootsie for Bray Wyatt, JR. I wouldn't give Bray Wyatt creative control.
Yeah, well, nobody deserves creative control. That's not their job.
Right.
Because that's like putting. I would ask you this question: do you agree or disagree in the theory of booking committees?
Oh, horrible.
Okay,
horrible.
I hate them too because I was on some where active talents were on the booking committee.
Yep.
There's a million. It's like working in Washington D.C. You talk about partisan politics.
JR, you know what it is, too, that people don't understand? Here's the thing with the committee, and I'm not going to be long-winded, but here's what they don't understand. You're sitting in a room, everybody's trying to get their, SHIT in. They're all so you spend 80% of the time listening to everybody's opinion and then debating, and all it is their opinion.
Right.
Nothing's based on numbers and who's drawing and who's not. So basically, JR, you spend 85% of your time doing this. Now, all of a sudden, you've got an hour left, and you've got to book the entire show. So you can imagine what that show is going to look like.
Yeah.
And it just drives me nuts that people can't understand that, and they can't see it. And with the committee, so much freaking time is wasted, and the more time you're wasting, the more quality you're taking away from the show.
You're preaching to the choir on that one, boy. I've been, some of those meetings are supposed to be over at 4:00, and okay, so they're at 5:00. So the wrestlers who are in the committee want to go home, and then the writing things down, and you go ahead and format this. You know the matches we're looking for. We're gonna do that. We're gonna close the show with this. We're gonna open the show with that, and put this in the middle. Make sure you separate the tags, and don't put two Divas matches back to back. The old normal. Okay, yeah, got it. Check, and then they leave.
Yep.
They go to the varsity and get a fried peach pie and a cheeseburger, and my fat ass is sitting there on the 12th floor of the CNN Center trying to format a TV show that then they second guess. Well, who wrote this?
JR, do you know this is a true story. My very first day, me and Ed, we show up as the outsiders at our very first WCW show, So we get to the building, and I don't remember who it was I saw, but our first question is, what time is the production meeting? Okay? You know what the answer to that was, JR?
Nope.
What's a production meeting? JR, they didn't do production meetings. They didn't know what it was. When we started there, they didn't do production meetings. So in other words, what you just described was how those shows got written before Ed and I arrived.
Oh, yeah. Well, and you got to remember, I was there before you got there, and the culture and the disposition of the community hadn't changed in TBS. They didn't know what they had when they bought it. They had a gold mine on the ground when they bought it, and they didn't realize it, and nobody wanted it in their division. Nobody wanted to be associated or affiliated with pro wrestling. So it got passed around like the proverbial redheaded stepchild. So every time company would come over, you'd make the redheaded stepchild go sit in the barn until they left. And same thing with wrestling. Wrestling just was a second-class citizen there until they made a few bucks, and then it just couldn't be sustained. So, well, anyway, it was crazy time there. And look, we got out of here without just saying anything bad about TNA, which is good. And there's nothing bad to say. I hope they stay in business. My theory is that Spike is lowballing them to get them at a better deal, because Spike's not setting the world on fire either. Those are my words, not yours. I don't dislike Spike. I watch Bar Rescue. I watch Impact on Thursdays.
You know what burns my goat, and again, I got to be careful.
It burns your goat?
Burns my goat. Yeah, I keep a goat in the backyard, and when I get upset, I go into the back with my lighter and set them on fire. But you know what it is? And if TNA gets hot at me for this because I'm talking about TNA, then God bless them, okay? The thing that drives me crazy, JR, is when so-called wrestling fans are going on social media and basking in the glory of Spike TV not renewing their contract and TNA, possibly be. How can you be a wrestling fan and be rooting against TNA and every man, woman, and child that's in that company and have busted their rear ends for the last 10 years, the Bobby Roode and the James Storm? How could anybody who's a wrestling fan be rooting against that company? That drives me insane.
Yeah, there's no answer to that question. They're just they're social media internet trolls is what they are. pyroandballyhoo.com is a new website that Vince has it's very diverse. It's not just a wrestling website by any stretch of the imagination. I read some stuff on about some movies that I was kind of interested in, and I enjoyed that. You've done a great job on it.
You know what it is, and I want to throw this out to you, because what it is, Pyro and Ballyhoo is, honestly, JR, I wake up in the morning and whatever thought enters my mind, that's what I start writing about. That's why I love the website. I'm going to propose this question to you because this was my column today, and I had the debate on both sides. I tried to keep it an even playing field, but I woke up this morning and I was thinking, if I had the choice, would I rather be a member of the Munsters or the Addams family? If you had your choice of growing up in one of those families, who would you choose and why?
Now, which one had the hottest chicks?
Well, Marilyn was the ugly niece in the Munsters.
The ugly niece. I kind of like Yvonne DiCarlo.
Yes, Lily.
Yeah, I think I'd probably have to hang her. I'd have to want to hang my pants on Lily's bedpost.
Well, I hope they're dry by that point.
Yeah, well, they are by now. I think Lily's one, and I.
Wait, Jay, I got to stop you again because I got to write that quote down because I may use that. JR, and I quote, "I would hang my pants on Lily." Okay, go ahead.
On Lily's bedpost, yeah, without question, without question. Well, listen, best of luck on pyroandballyhoo.com. All you folks around the world that are listening, if you want to curse Vince out or talk about him running 2 wrestling companies or things like that he's used to hearing, or be creative and insult him in a way that maybe would be new.
You know, the website is pyroandballyhoo.com. The Twitter is just at pyroballyhoo. There's no end, just Pyro and Ballyhoo.
All right, there you go.
Some other idiot beat me to that name.
All right, so the Twitter, at pyroballyhoo.
There you go.
PYROBALLYHOO. Well, Vince, listen, I really appreciate you being with us. We covered a lot of ground, and then let's do this again one of these days. Well, because I marked off a lot of my questions, but I've got a lot of ammunition left in my 6-shooter. So we'll get together and do it. And you also have for podcast fans, you're doing a podcast now as well. Tell us quickly, when does that drop?
Yeah, I usually do my podcast on Wednesday nights, JR, on pyroandballyhoo.com. But just real quickly, I just opened up a VIP section that I'm excited about, because on the VIP section, I'm actually doing video podcasts, where I'm on Skype with the person I'm talking to, and, you basically can see a visual, with the podcast.
You're brave. You're brave, man.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, there's been a lot of ugly people on my show. As a matter of fact, Ed was the first one, and I had to throw a blanket over my monitor, but we got through it.
Eddie, stump. Hey, and if you go on that VIP site, is there access to those Polaroids of Ferrara before he got in wrestling or anything?
Well, that's the double VIP.
All right. Well, when he comes on, he's getting it, man. When he comes on, I'm saying, so you're the son of a gun that created the Oklahoma character that was just so traumatic to my young daughters at that time.
You got to set him up that way.
Oh, yeah.
You have to set him up that way. Ed is one of the biggest hearts of anybody I've ever met. You will crush all his hopes and dreams if you open it that way.
Professor Ed Ferrara, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's where you can relax, America. Our children are getting a higher education through men and women like Professor Ed Ferrara.
Yep.
So that's good. Hey, Vince, thanks, and I appreciate it. And we'll be talking again very soon. But I appreciate everything you're doing. And it's pyroandballyhoo.com. If you make it, folks, to pyroandballyhoo.com, you can read about everything that Vince is doing.
Yeah, and JR, I really, really appreciate you, having me on. Yeah, I love having conversations with you.
Well, it's good. Hey, see, there's the deal, folks. Vince and I do not philosophically agree on the core. We do agree on entertaining the audience and getting all the eyeballs. But my way of doing it and his way of doing it are contrasting colors. But it doesn't mean that either color is bad. It just means we have a different opinion. But at no time tonight did I call him any bad names or he called me any bad names. It was all a matter of that's how we can communicate in this world if you choose to, or you can be a keyboard warrior and get your ass blocked on Twitter. That's easy too.
And not only that, JR, but I mean that's how you create the best end product. Take everybody's opinion into consideration. Talk things out. At the end of the day, you've got what's best for business.
There you go. Every time. Well, listen, thanks. Have a great night, and we'll do this again soon.
All right, JR. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Vince. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, so what are you waiting for? Hurry to SaveWithConrad.com.
My guest now, I don't know if he has a Casper mattress, but I bet he sleeps well at night because he lives in paradise in Colorado. My guest, Vince Russo. Vince, how are you?
JR, I thought you were going to say, you sure I sleep well at night because I'm no longer working for the WWE.
Well, hey, it helps. It helps to not work the majority of your life. Sometimes get a little siesta. Vince will say, the other Vince, Mr. McMahon, sleep is our enemy.
Yep, exactly. Sleep and catching a cold.
Yeah. Well, and if you sneeze in his presence, your ass could be you could be admonished verbally, or it could be career changing somewhere down the line. That son of a bitch, he sneezes all the time.
JR, I remember, and I don't know if you remember this or not. I don't remember like the specifics, the date and the pay-per-view and all that. But man, I remember we had a Sunday night pay-per-view, and we had to go in Saturday night, for the production meeting. And JR, I swear to you, I was probably the sickest I ever was my entire life. I mean, borderline, I probably should have been in a hospital. But you don't call in sick. You can't call in sick. So I'll never forget. Vince was sitting at the head of the table, and I was sitting at the right. And I was going through like tissue after tissue after tissue. Finally, the glasses at the end of the nose, the same look you got a million times. He looks over to me on the right, and he goes, what is wrong with you? And I looked at him, and I was just like, Vince, I'm sick. And dead as a heart attack, serious as a heart attack, JR, he looked at me and said, there is no sick.
Yep.
And I said, okay.
I've been told you can be sick at work as easy as you can be sick at home.
Right, exactly.
I've had that one. I've had that one relayed to me. I'm writing my autobiography right now, and we're at the part about the influence my father had in my crazy life, and what kind of guy he was. And if you could read excerpts of it and say, well, he was a bad dude. And then you can read other parts of it and say, well, he was what a great dad, which is what he was. But sometimes he was abrupt, and he was set in his ways and hard-headed and stubborn. Does that define Mr. McMahon in many ways? Some of those traits do, I think.
Yeah, Jay. You know what it always goes back to with me, and I think you'll agree with this. There are two things like that I can always say to best categorize Vince, and nobody will be able to agree to this more than you. And number one, if you want to work for him and you want to work for the WWE, I mean, first and foremost, you have to, hand over your life on a silver platter. I mean, that's number one. Nothing else matters. Family doesn't matter. I mean, everything else gets put on the back burner. The WWE is your life. That's number one. But I always tell people this on the other side of the coin. I worked, JR, you and I, we worked. We can't even count the hours that we worked on a weekly basis. But the one thing I'll always say is no matter what time I went in the morning, and no matter how late I left at night, the guy's car was always there. Always there. So, at the end of the day, he demanded so much from you, and, you had to put the rest of your life on the back burner. But with that being said, the guy did lead by example, and, he worked harder probably than anybody else. Now, granted, he didn't have anything else, going on in his life. It was the WWE, and that was it. But, the guy always worked harder than everybody else, and, so that's, you really couldn't say too much,
I think guys that know him would agree with that. He outworks the competition. He outworks, and the competition's even inside his own company.
Right.
Nobody outworks the old man, and they never will. And I want to talk more about him. I got some questions about him. So, thanks to me, you had to watch the TLC pay-per-view. And I know it was a big thing to ask. I've listened to many of your soliloquies, as Dusty Rhodes would say lately, and they're entertaining. And hey, look, people say, why? I have people that said, I won't listen to him on your show. And I'll tweet them back. Okay, that's your prerogative. No problem. I like to listen to you, but I don't agree with Russo. Well, I don't agree with everything Russo says either, but I agree with his right to say it. And
Right.
I think I have enough professionalism at this stage of my life, finally, that I have most of my ego in check, and I'm not going to take a personal affront because he and I have differing opinions. But one thing I'll say, I saw a lot of feedback on TLC. I don't know what that means. That means that they did well or people liked it, but it seemed like there were certain elements of it that struck a chord that hasn't been used lately. The chord, I mean.
Well, JR, I think that's good and bad. The good part is, we used to know this all the time, in wrestling, especially writing the show. The last thing the audience is going to remember is the last thing they saw. I mean, that's the last thing they're going to walk away remembering. They're not going to, remember the spot fest in the opening match. They're going to remember the very last thing they saw. And I think the thing they did with Reigns was one of the best things I've seen them do in well over the last year. I thought they did a great job for him. I mean, Hunter sold like a fool. I mean, they gave Reigns everything. The intensity was there. He did a good job. But that's good and bad news. And here's what my concern is. Last night, they got a buzz going into tonight. And, I mean, they really haven't had that in a while. And even myself, okay, let's see how they handle this, tonight on Raw. But they've done this a couple of times, like over the last 6 months or the last year, where they'll do something really strong and they'll get you interested and you want to watch the show. And then you watch the show, and it's such a letdown compared to the way they set the table. So the bad part is now they take 2 steps back. So that's why, last night they definitely generated buzz. I think there's interest going into tonight's show. I'm interested to see how they handle it. But, again, they have to be careful because if they don't live up to what happened last night, that's going to work against them.
Yeah, follow-up is essential with Reigns. That seems to be their project right now. The 2 things there's 2 or 3 things about Reigns. I actually like Reigns, and I like the personality. We all saw a glimpse of his natural personality last year when Austin did the SummerSlam 2K Symposium, and Reigns was a panelist. That's that same symposium the year before that I did, I was the conductor of a runaway train, and it ended in my termination. But they did a nice job of that presentation, I thought, the 2K people. Austin was a good host. And Reigns was great ad-libbing, just carrying on a conversation. If they will allow him to be himself and not overproduce him, I think he can be pretty good. I thought he should have had a heel run first. That's just me. But I'm not angry that he's not, so I'm not living and dying with it. I think him becoming a Clint Eastwood kind of he speaks in sound bites, and he never put him in a position to carry a 15 or 20-minute promo segment. He's not ready for that.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, that one they did last week with him and Sheamus, I mean, that was painful. That was really one of the most awkward promos I've seen in a long time. But listen, I like Reigns a lot too, and I don't put that blame on him. A lot of these guys are going out and they're being overproduced and they're saying exactly what they're told to say, because they don't want to make any waves. But when I look at Reigns, man, and you'll appreciate this, JR, the rich heritage and the family lines of wrestling, it's in this guy's blood. He grew up on it. He knows what to do. The instincts, that they're just there. But when, you're constantly being handicapped and handcuffed and, you can't be yourself, then you know, JR, with any performer, now you go out there and you're trying not to make mistakes. And that's the position they've put him in since, last year's Royal Rumble.
I think it's the same parallel as a sports team playing not to lose,
right,
as opposed to playing to win.
Exactly. And the worst thing about that, JR, and I mean, you know this better than anybody with all the talent that, you worked with and everything else, man, once you shake a guy's confidence and a talent feels like you don't believe in them, that you have to go out and script every word, then what they start doing is second-guessing themselves. And once they start doubting themselves, then they're in no man's land. And like I said, I think that's been going on with Reigns for the last year.
I'm a big fan of mentoring in life in general and in the wrestling business. I think it's a lost art in the wrestling business, mentoring, helping out the youngsters. But I think that the Reigns has got a great opportunity. I think the fact that what he did last night was basically what people want that character to be. He's got a lot of sex appeal. I know a lot of women that really like him. So I think that's good. He's got the great WWE look. There's heritage there. So I think that there's a lot of real good qualities there. The WWE has got to be leery of not force feeding the man down it's a different audience, Vince, even than it was in the Attitude Era. With all the social media and all the information flow is amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and tonight, man, I got to tell you, it's I kind of feel for them. I really do, because of all night. I think this is no doubt the most important show that they've had all year, because I think this is this is the hottest thing they've done for some time. Unfortunately for them now, they've got to pay this off in Philadelphia. And we both know how Philly is. So I'm just real curious, man, to see how they handle it. And, if the crowd's not with him based on what they give him, I'm real curious to see what they do.
Yeah, it should be good. I think it's going to be good. I admire, my hat's off to both Sheamus and Reigns for a Sunday night's match. They really worked hard, and they put their body through hell. It's the old JR cliche of, how do you learn to fall off a 20-foot ladder? I don't know about that either, but I sure as hell don't know how you learn to fall across those metal ladders, and with absolutely no way to break your fall. It's impact. It's flesh and blood and bones against that damn steel, and that's what's going to happen. And I've never seen anybody rehearse it, because you just want to do it once, for God's sakes. It's
right.
It's horrific. And things like that they use, they're the big as they are. I thought those guys worked really hard. They had a good match. And do you think sometimes, Vince, because you were there in the heart of it, do you think that, and I've seen this, I'm just asking the question, that some people think that the Roman Reigns anti-authority character is too Stone Cold-esque to be effective? I don't have an issue with duplicity or things being tweaked. He looks different within Stone Cold. He's going to have a different, gait, pace, whatever. But I understand the anti-authority thing. I get that. Does that bother you?
Well, that doesn't bother me at all, JR. But obviously, listen, there's never going to be another Austin. We both know that. But I think this is what I'm afraid they're going to miss the boat on, JR, because this is what I'm afraid of. Because I think the story is very, very different. Because first and foremost, Austin wanted to be a loner. Austin did not want to be friends with anybody. He was an island unto himself, and that was Austin's personality. He never got close to anybody. He never trusted anybody.
No.
Reigns hasn't had that character. That's not who he's been. As a matter of fact, it's been the complete opposite, because a lot of times he surrounded himself with his cousins, the Russos, and, his good friend Dean Ambrose. So the character's different there. this is my concern. And again, if I was writing and if I was there was a huge hole in the end of last night's show when, the announcers pointed out the referee can't do anything because there's a no DQ. When Rusev and Del Rio hit the ring, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, where's the Usos and where's Ambrose?
Yeah.
I mean, his own flesh and blood, his cousins didn't come out to help him. His good friend Dean Ambrose didn't come out to help him. Now, if I'm writing this, that's such a huge hole that to me that has to be part of the story. Did his own family sell him out to not get involved in the match? I mean, what's this? Tonight, if I'm Reigns, first and foremost, I'm asking my own family some real difficult questions.
Yeah.
I just hope, man, and like you said, JR, we were real good in connecting the dots and telling the story over and over again and not letting anything slide through the cracks. I just hope that wasn't a big detail that they don't cover and they don't discuss and they don't take advantage of something that could be really good TV.
Well, there's a lot of ways to go with that too, because what you're looking for is people to have valid alibis as to why they weren't there, and those alibis have got to be substantiated. And there's a lot of ways to play that out without it having to end in segment 6. I mean, you can play this thing along a little bit. It doesn't have to be the matter doesn't have to be resolved tonight. There could still be a little bit of fun and games going on here, or maybe the authority sees an opportunity to find somebody that's a little vulnerable. Maybe that's an Ambrose. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe that's a Usos being bought out. Now, if they see that there's there's a crack in the door that Roman doesn't, now there's some distrust there. Let's take advantage of it. Something like that could happen. I think that they got to cover, they got to have alibis, they got to connect the dots. I understand why they didn't do it because it put the entire spotlight on Reigns, and I thought he went off the air very, very strong. And but they need to cover, they need to protect the Usos and Dean Ambrose.
Well, JR, they did the same thing last week. If you notice, going off of Raw, they did the same thing the week before. They put together the League of Nations. They made them strong on that show. Last week, the League of Nations opens the show. That's the first thing you see. They're putting it over. At the end of the night, Roman Reigns is putting Sheamus through a table, and the League of Nations is nowhere to be found. That can't happen. I mean, that is such really bad writing. You got to protect every single character on the roster. For 2 weeks, he puts together League of Nations. At the end of the show, Reigns is beating his backside, and League of Nations is nowhere to be found. That's the part that, casual wrestling fans, they're sitting at home, they're saying the same thing that you and I are saying, where's the League of Nations? That's what turns them off the show. You've got to pay attention to the detail.
Yeah, you got to remain logical. The other thing I saw in that whole encounter, the first faction to approach or confront the League of Nations were the Wyatts. What are we doing?
Right, exactly.
Now, first of all, I am a major proponent. I may be the minority. That's cool. Hey, I've got my opinion. That's all. I'm not doing anything about it, but expressing myself. Is I think that Bray Wyatt has the potential to be an amazing character babyface. I have when he stepped up and first spoke to the League of Nations, there was a ooh and an ah that was an organic thing that people reacted to. They responded to the salvo, the verbal salvo from Bray Wyatt. I think that he was very close to becoming, or could have become, a very significant babyface if given the opportunity. Now, if that isn't going to happen, then you need to put a lot of heat on his faction. They need to go clean. They don't need to get beat. They need to go clean for a while. And they need to beat some more than just up-and-comers. But, you know, he needs to be featured in that quartet of monsters. Even though Luke Harper is probably the best worker of the group, arguably, you know, I think Bray Wyatt has got an immense upside. What's your thoughts on that character? I guess I'm saying this. No, the floor is yours after that. I think there are some characters there that are curiously miscast or misbooked. Yeah.
Well, J.O., I would say this, and I've said this I've said this for the longest time. Far and away, Bray Wyatt is the most interesting and intriguing and talented character that I've seen since I was there. So literally over the last 15 years, I mean, I would give my right arm to work with that guy. And the fact that he's been on the scene for so long already, and they still have not been able to get this guy over to the level that he should be over, it boggles my mind. I mean, all the tools are there. Everything is there, but again, it's the storylines that they're putting him in. It's the way they're booking these matches that, you know, like pretty much everybody else on the roster, these guys are just spinning their wheels. You know, we win one, we lose one. We win one, we lose one. They seem to do that with everybody on the roster, and nobody is getting over. I mean, perfect case in point, you know, when the Wyatt family, you know, wrestled Taker and Kane at Survivor Series. Now, listen, if you're a wrestling fan, you know the future doesn't lie in Taker and Kane. And yes, I do understand it's Taker's 25th anniversary. I get it. But who are we trying to get over here? The future of the company, or, you know, two guys that really aren't going to work that much anymore. Now, if the Wyatts win that match, it's, you know, holy crap, they just beat The Undertaker and Kane. Nobody would have saw that. Then they follow that up with, holy crap, they just beat the ECW originals. But that's not how they booked it. You know, they put Kane and Taker over, you know, probably because of Vince's relationship with Taker that I understand, but it's not the best thing for business. So they put Taker and Kane over the Wyatts. So now they feel like, okay, we got to give the Wyatts their win back. So me and some of the ECW originals, and they'll beat them. There's no consistency with, okay, who on this roster do we want to get over?
That's what they got to decide. We said that here many times. You've got to establish what the nucleus is going to be. As we move into, let's just kind of buzz through this show a little bit. I didn't understand this. I'm a big fan of both Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks. I think Banks has got a very unique sex appeal, athleticism, feels like a star. She presents herself like a star. However, I thought the match was a little bit rushed, and here's what I didn't understand. Why do you need to take a break in the middle of the match to do more network promos? Are you kidding me? You really need to do that. And do you really believe that isn't an emotional disconnect from those of us that were enjoying the first half of the match? Because it's easy to say, oh, you'll come back. Yeah, I'll come back, but I'm not going to be nearly as interested as I was before we left to go hear this other promo.
Well, you know, J.O., you know, again, it's like, you know, just the problems. You know, so much, you know, again, being a writer, the structure of the show and the way they write and lay out the show is so flawed. I mean, if they fix that, that alone will increase viewership. And it's simple things. It's easy things that they could do to tighten up the script. Again, going back to the Attitude Era, every segment was a stand-alone segment. You know, a beginning, a middle, and an end. We never let a wrestling match go through break for the exact reason that you're saying. Because now, you know they're going to channel search. Now you got to go back and get them all over again to watch the second half of the match. What we did was, going into every break, coming out of every commercial, there was always a hook, a reason you had to come back that you could not miss it, even if it was, a 5-second of Austin showing up or a 5-second of McMahon, pacing in the hallway. Whatever it was, the show was structured to keep the audience there so they wouldn't tune off. And of course we did that because we were head to head with Nitro. But okay, in 2015, you're head to head with Monday Night Football. Why can't you have that same mentality in structuring the show? So there are so many problems on so many levels, but a lot of them could be easily addressed.
Yeah, I agree with that. The show last night, I didn't understand the break in that. I liked the girls. I thought they brought a little something. I thought that the one thing about booking a TLC event is that you need to ration out the use of the gimmicks, the tables, the ladders, and the chairs, so that the last thing you see, the last thing you remember, as you mentioned earlier, the main event, is given the opportunity to be somewhat unique. How do you top what all you've seen, tables and ladders and chairs? All you've done is combine them in this one match,
right,
for the WWE World Title. It's a big match. It's the match. I think they introduced the champion first. I didn't like that. Call me old school. What difference does it make? Oh, Jesus, God almighty. What the hell difference does it make? It's psychological. That's
right.
All. It's psychological. That's all.
Yep.
And to tell me that come out to the clean ring with through the crowd as he does, that Roman Reigns would have got a big pop. Of course he would have. But anyway. That bothered me a little bit.
Well, J.O., look at the way they opened the show. I mean, they opened the show. All I could think about during that first match was Al Snow, because Al Snow always said, Al Snow keeps it real simple. The minute the bell rings, you should be trying to win the match. Real simple. That's why you're in the match. A boxer is trying to win the match from round one. MMA from the first round, trying to win the match. All they did in that first match was set up spots. Nobody was trying to win the match. They were setting up all these death-defying, dangerous spots. So in the very first match, you had 3 tag teams who, quite frankly, don't mean nearly as much as your main event guys. But in that first match, they pulled out every trick in the book. I mean, there were going to be no better spots than what you saw in that first match. So, right off the bat, you're setting up a spot fest. The psychology is all out of whack because nobody's trying to win the match, and now you've taken away what everybody after them can do.
Very challenging. It's a very interesting analogy. I've heard some people say that, and I've heard some say that it was their favorite match of the pay-per-view or the big event, which is fine if it. But as a booker or as someone that's involved in the process, wherever our hat may be hung in the process, writing and announcing it, and writing it, whatever, and announcing it. I thought that, I said, geez, it's going to be hard to follow.
Yep.
And it wasn't, and nobody could follow it. It was that good. It was outstanding. You just, as a producer, for lack of a better term, you hate that your very first match is the best match of the night. I don't think that's what she had in mind when he wrote the show.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's like, those guys get into the back and saying, follow that. Well, I mean, do you really want those 6 individuals to be stealing the show? I mean, I don't think so.
No.
That's really, like you said, JR, that's really where the agents or producers, whatever they're called now, they all have to get together and know, okay, this is what we're doing here, this is what we're doing here, this is what we're doing, and know where their priorities are. I mean, you don't want your priorities to be in the first match.
No, absolutely. And what do you think? What's your opinion? The second match was involving Rusev against Ryback. What do you think of the dynamic between Rusev and Lana?
They had Rusev right at the cusp of making him, a headliner, a main eventer. When he was U.S. champion, they were giving him win after win after win after win. They were building him beautifully. And I remember, it was at the time Kurt Angle was trying to get back in the WWE. And I sat there and said, if they sign Angle, even to come in and do the job for Rusev. If Rusev can beat the Olympic gold medalist, red, white, and blue, the whole 9 yards, that will make Rusev. And, knowing Kurt the way I do, JR, he would have made the guy look like $1 million. But somehow, some way, they went from that to Lana and Summer Rae and Dolph and this. I don't even know what they went to. And basically, within the matter of, a month or two, they turned Rusev into another guy on the card. And I look at this stuff and I'm like, how do you just keep making so many mistakes? It's really not rocket science.
No, it isn't. And, okay, back here with Vince Russo. We're talking about WWE's TLC, which was held this past Sunday. We've talked about Vince's his lack of thinking as far as the creative is concerned regarding Lana and Rusev. I believe that they can be resurrected, and I believe they can still be meaningful. Here's what I wonder sometimes. I wonder how much mentoring Rusev is getting and how focused he is on becoming a really good heel. He doesn't retreat enough. There's fundamental things he doesn't do that he could be so much more effective and so much more over if he embraced the nuances. And then you wonder, well, okay, there are guys there that can help Rusev be a heel, but who's there and who's the person that is assigned to help Lana become a better valet? Because that's cut to the chase. That's what she's a valet, or whatever term you want to use. But she's a very pretty advocate, shall we say? I don't know what the hell she is, but how does she learn her psychology? How can she learn to be Sherry Martel, or how can she learn to be some of these divas that actually learned how to be a good corner person, which is just not something you throw out there and they shake their things, their moneymakers.
JR, the people that I talk to, there, and I'm sure you do as well, man, everybody I talk to, I hear the same thing over and over and over. Everybody's afraid to speak up. Everybody's just doing their job. Nobody wants to, stir things up. Nobody wants to piss Vince McMahon off. And basically what all that equals is, nobody's taking chances. In other words, nobody's taking Lana under their wing. Nobody's taking Rusev under their wing, because God forbid if they do, and they tell the guy the wrong thing, then there's going to be hell to pay. Am I going to lose my job? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just get the feeling that everybody's watching their back. Nobody's going out on the limb. And here's the thing, JR. It wasn't like that when you and I were there. I mean, everybody when we were there, all we cared about was making the product better. I've said this a million times. I never saw anybody anybody talk to Vince McMahon the way Shawn Michaels did. And guess what? Shawn Michaels' career didn't turn out that bad. But, he told Vince how he felt, and he took chances. And when he didn't like something, he said something. How that has turned into, the leader and just a bunch of vanilla soldiers, I don't understand that. I know it's become a publicly traded company. I understand that. But why should that have changed the mindset of every single person in that company wanting the WWE to be the best that it could possibly be? And with that comes speaking up, talking out of line, taking chances, taking your balls in your hand, all for the betterment of the company. I don't know why it stopped being that way.
I guess, Vince, the lack of places to go, you get guys that have a nice wrestling resume, and it looks good and is impressive to a pro wrestling company. But how many other pro wrestling companies are out there where they can afford to pay you remotely close to what you're earning at WWE to help establish that quality of life? A lot of employees. I was looking this week, I think it was, looking at life insurance or health insurance, and what it's going to cost for my wife and I to be insured is ridiculous. I mean, it's more money than I used to ever make in wrestling a month. So they don't want to lose their benefits. They don't want to lose their 401ks they didn't have when they were wrestling. They finally got their taxes caught up on, and they're getting their withholdings done at the office because they're employees, and so they're cool. So I can understand why guys can certainly get off to themselves and have a different mindset, but nobody wants to jeopardize their job as much as it may need to be some of these things brought up. I thought, here's another deal. Alberto Del Rio last night against Swagger. Swagger, one of my Oklahoma boys. Yes, I'm biased. I think can he be a main event guy under the right tutelage? Perhaps. He's a magnificent athlete. Needs leadership. He needs a Paul E. He needs a Heyman. A Heyman, not the Heyman, but a Heyman. Mm-hmm. And Alberto, I think, seems to have more get up and go when he's a babyface. And they don't have any Hispanic babyface. Good-looking guy. He's not too old. He's still got vibrance. He looks like one of those. He looks like a news anchor from one of those Hispanic television networks. Good-looking guy. So I don't know. I thought that match kind of stepped up and overachieved a little bit. I don't know if you watched or remember much of that match, but here's the bottom line: U.S. title means very little. Mm-hmm. Don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, the thing I remembered about that match was kind of what you said about the last match, JR. And I mean, both guys worked really, really hard. And yeah, I mean, Del Rio looks like a movie star. I mean, he looks great. I mean, I'm a big fan of the guys. I think he looks great. But again, until they make the United States title mean something, and that's the thing. It was starting to mean something. With Russo, the fact that he was anti-American and he had that title, it was starting to mean something. And you can't have it at that point and then bring it down 5 notches and start all over again. That's just really bad creative.
Were you surprised to see Kevin Owens lose the Intercontinental title, another somewhat tepid championship? In all due respect to both men, but were you surprised to see Kevin Owens lose to Dean Ambrose?
JR, I am not a Kevin Owens fan at all, and for a couple of reasons. I'll tell you why. First of all, Vince McMahon himself taught me one thing, and Vince always used to say to me, JR, if you want to be a star, you have to look like a star. when Kevin Owens comes out to the ring and you have casual wrestling fans sitting at home and watching TV, I'm not talking about the internet wrestling community that know, Kevin Steen, and he was in the independent circuit for 15 years. I'm talking about regular casual television viewers, wrestling fan. A guy like Kevin Owens comes out, and the first thing they're going to say is, who is this fat guy? And I'm sorry, I'm from the old school where wrestlers need to look and act a certain way. There are two things wrestlers need to do for a living. They need to wrestle and they need to work out. And I can't accept the shape that Kevin Owens is, and he does not look like a star. That's number one. Number two, I've been going back to, we do a show on, VinceRussoBrand.com. Every week we look at the old Attitude Era tapes, okay? I've been watching the last couple of weeks somebody you're very, very familiar with, and his name was Carl Ouellet. Carl Ouellet is 10 times the wrestler that Kevin Owens will ever be, and at that time, Carl Ouellet was even lucky to be getting on the show. That was the talent we had and the roster we had. When the Quebecers were on the show, he was lucky. This guy is heads and tails a better wrestler than Kevin Owens, and Kevin Owens was the Intercontinental Champion up until last night. In my opinion, that right there shows you how far the wrestling business has fallen. Kevin Owens was an independent wrestler for 15 years for a reason. Because for 15 years, people in management didn't think he was good enough to ever make it to the WWE. So there's a reason he was on the indie circuit for 15 years. To go from that to the guy is now the Intercontinental Champion, and then we sit here and wonder why the Intercontinental Champion doesn't mean anything when Randy Savage was the Intercontinental Champion. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that. I can't wait till Jim Cornette hears that you and he actually quasi-agreed on something. Wrestling business. I can hear it now. God, Vince Russo, and he and I agreed on Kevin Owens, and then this damn Kenny, that fat bastard.
Hey, I bet you he'll change his view tomorrow after he hears that soliloquy.
That damn Dudley do-right looking son of a bitch. Oh, I love Corny. And I like. How do you like Ambrose? How do you like Dean? I said on a tweet. Here's what I said on a tweet. It's not preconditioning because nobody can precondition you. You have your mind made up, and I don't have a problem with that. I may not agree with you, but that's all right. I don't agree with my wife either, but sometimes I don't. I even have the balls to let her know I don't agree with her. The Ambrose tweet said that he reminded me of Bill Murray, Terry Funk, and Brian Pillman. And then somebody suggested I should throw a little bit of Roddy Piper in there. I can't really, I don't know. But he's unique. He's a unique character, is what I'm saying, I guess. He's got a lot of unique elements. And to say a wrestler reminds you of Bill Murray, to some people, that's going to be an insult. It's not meant to be. I find Bill Murray, about you, to be one of the more entertaining actors still working.
Yeah, JR, they're not giving him anything. Dean Ambrose goes to the ring. He tries so hard. He's working with everything that he's got. I loved his celebration victory yesterday. That was all him improvising. He's trying to work with everything he's got, but at the end of the day, you've got to give these guys material. They need character. Dean Ambrose, he's supposed to be the lunatic fringe. Okay, so what have they told us about him that makes him a lunatic? When you saw Pillman, you believed Brian Pillman was missing a few loose screws. But, JR, if you remember, Pillman broke into Austin's house with a gun. There were stories backing up why this guy had mental problems. Since they don't give Ambrose those stories, he's got to make funny faces in the ring. And he's trying too hard to get over the fact that I'm the lunatic fringe, when the problem is creative isn't giving him any meat on the bone. I'm watching Raw right now, JR. The second match of the night is Dolph Ziggler and Dean Ambrose. So they've put Ambrose out there again just to wrestle a match. No story, no character development, nothing. That's only going to take you so far, and that's not on the talent. That's on creative.
Yeah, you're right about that. It certainly is. Because Ambrose seems to have some instincts. I guess that was kind of my synopsis, is that guys like Bill Murray can be a very unique character, depending on what it's called for. I always thought that Pillman was very compelling, and certainly Terry Funk has reinvented himself multiple times in an amazing career. So I hope that Ambrose gets a shot at it. When we went into that Paige-Charlotte match, I didn't know who the babyface was and who the heel was. So I'm thinking, okay, you haven't been paying attention. They're not in your demo. You're uninterested or something. So let's not blame it on anybody. But when they show this package and they do some, then the package is confusing. So now I don't know who the hell. Now Rick does a couple of heelish things that at least gives me the reason that Charlotte had to cheat to gain an unfair advantage to win. So I like that. And if she's going to be living Daddy's shadow and be Daddy's little girl, and Rick is an overbearing, protective father of a prodigy athlete, okay, I'll try that. But do you think in the long haul that Charlotte should be so closely connected to her amazingly famous father?
That's going to kill her, JR, and she doesn't need to be. I don't watch a lot of NXT. I'm not a fan of NXT. I'm not. So I've only watched it sporadically, but when I was watching it, 6 months ago and stuff, and I saw Charlotte, I was like, this girl has the potential to be the greatest women's wrestler of all time. I thought she was that good. She does, and it's funny because I was watching closely yesterday, and there's JBL putting over Flair, not putting over Charlotte, putting over Ric Flair. And I sat there and I said, this is exactly what the problem is going to be. This girl is so talented. Yes, they have to work on her personality. That could take a little bit of time, but by putting her with Flair, who you know better than anybody, is larger than life. She's constantly going to be in his shadow, even when he's not trying. He could be out there and almost be invisible, and all eyes are going to be on Ric Flair. And, I think it goes hand in hand with this. Again, I love that all those girls came over from NXT. I love that they brought Becky over and Sasha over and Charlotte over. But again, they've been there now for about, maybe 3 or 4 months. Every week they mix and match the matches. What do we know about Sasha Banks? What do we know about her? What do we know about Becky Lynch? What do we know about Paige, aside from the fact that every arena she wrestles at, it's her house? What do we know about these people? So that's why you're dead on. It is confusing with Paige and Charlotte. Who's the babyface? Who's the heel? Because they haven't told us who either person is. So, the easiest thing they could do is, okay, Ric Flair is Charlotte's father. That's her character. But in the meanwhile, that's absolutely going to kill her and her credibility, because as long as she's out there with him, she's going to be in his shadow.
I've got a few other questions I want to kind of rapid fire at you, but to close up TLC, if you're a teacher giving it a grade, what grade does it get?
Because I liked the end as much as I did. The two things I think they did really well is, finally they gave the Whites a big win, which they desperately needed. And the ending with Roman I thought was absolutely tremendous, and that's the last thing you're going to remember. Like I said, the first match, a spot fest, nobody was trying to win. Rusev and Ryback, they made Ryback look like the biggest imbecile to fall for the Lana trick for the twice in the last 6 days. So that did him a lot more damage than good. I'd say JR. To be nice, I'd say B-.
All right. Question. I get this a lot. Your opinion, your take on it, and let's try to blow through these as quickly as we can. Do you think Vince McMahon will ever retire?
No.
I agree wholeheartedly. Ain't gonna happen. You got any Ric Flair stories? I'm going to go to Charlotte this week to tape the Ric Flair 30 for 30 for ESPN. Do you have any? Do you have a couple of short Ric Flair stories you want to share, or should you not, with the fact that you now at least are following the preachings of the good book?
No, the only story I'd like to share is a lot of people don't remember this, but when I had my feud, when me and David had the feud with Rick and Reed at WCW, Charlotte was introduced in that storyline. So because of that, I am now taking full credit for Charlotte's wrestling career.
Attaboy. Attaboy. Yeah. Good job. There you go.
There you go.
Long Island proud, brother. I'm not sharing credit with anybody. I'm going to talk. Part of Flair is part of my act. I'm going to be down in Dallas for WrestleMania and doing 3 shows at the House of Blues, and there's plenty of Flair material. But if it's an 18 or over crowd, I can generally roll out the Flair content. If it's an all audience where there's children there, I usually let the Nates stay asleep.
Yeah, JR, I don't think I want to hear the Ric Flair stories you have, to be honest with you. They might get me in trouble.
Mauro Ranallo was announced by Sports Illustrated, and then he made a comment to, I guess WWE made a comment that he is going to be the new play-by-play man for SmackDown beginning in January 2016. Are you aware of Mauro Ranallo, 1, and 2, will it make a difference?
JR, listen, I'm not blowing smoke. And I wanted to ask you this question because I'm going to turn the table on you.
Uh-oh.
Okay? JR, I told you listen, I could not watch Raw on Monday nights anymore because I would do Raw reviews and I found myself being so down on the product. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to bury the WWE. I just got to stay away from it. So I started reviewing the Attitude Era shows. And I sit there and I listen to the freaking craftsmen of You and the King every week, and I shake my head because you have to work in the business, and you really have to know the job of an announcer to really understand just how great you guys were. I mean, you could not sit down with that announce team today in the WWE and make them understand this was the greatness of Lawler and JR. They wouldn't even get it on that level. Here's what I want to ask you, JR. Every week when I'm reviewing the show, I wind up with like probably half a dozen JR one-liners or King one-liners that pop me. I sit down, I write them down, and I go hysterical. JR, how much of that was rehearsed? I mean, I'm talking about like specific comedic lines. How much of that was rehearsed between you and Jerry, and how much of it just came like right off the top of your head in the moment?
every now and then there'd be something on TV or a movie that would be topical. I remember we used to pull a few lines out of Talladega Nights because it was, it was funny. It was, you had the big star. Will Ferrell played the big-time driver, and his buddy Riley, the actor Riley, John Riley, was his sidekick. So
right.
I always looked at Lawler as the king, as the star of the pair, and I was there to help him further. I was a sidekick. I had no problem being a sidekick. So every now and then we'd find a line here and there, Vince, but really it was just natural chemistry. We were blessed, and I'm not taking any credit for it. We were lucky. But, for me to have Jerry Lawler as my partner, and when he's motivated and he's called upon, he can be as caustic today as a heel as he ever was, and probably would be even more effective than he is as good old King. Has been around forever. But he was a star of the team. But we rarely rehearsed. He didn't want it. We really neither one cared to know the finishes, and it wasn't because we didn't take a personal interest in what you guys were doing. We just figured that we'd probably respond better to what you wanted us to do if we saw it for the first time and went with our instincts. That's kind of what we did.
Yeah, because I sit there like every week, and I just say nobody else could have came up with these lines but these two guys. And oh my God, JR, it's such a lost art, and the way you used to keep the people there with Austin just arrived in the building. McMahon's looking for Austin in the back. The Undertaker, there was such an art. I just sit here and I wonder, that writing team at the WWE, the creative team, sit down and watch these old shows from, the writing to the announcing to the dotting the I's and the crossing the T's. Take time to watch what worked, because they're so far away from it today, and then they sit there and like, oh, geez, we're almost down to a 2.0. Why? There's a million reasons why, but they got to study the old game films.
Might not hurt. WrestleMania Texas is going to be AT&T Stadium on Sunday, April the 3rd. I'll be in Dallas, as I mentioned, at the House of Blues on Saturday, before and after the Hall of Fame ceremony, and then after Raw, which ought to be a beaut, starting at 11 o'clock with a Q&A at the House of Blues. 8-minute walk. Stu would say, at 8 minutes is at it's 8 kilometers, Stu. I don't know how far it is, for God's sakes. Do you think that they'll do north of 100,000 people?
I do think so, JR, because I have to tell you, man, I had not watched the WrestleMania since I left. Last year, somebody had me, do some events and stuff like that. So I was in, San Jose when they had WrestleMania. And, JR, it blew me away the way they owned that town. And, it's almost like the whole year to them has become WrestleMania. And when it comes to promotion and marketing and advertising, my God, they do a tremendous job taking over the city. The entire world knows where it is. So I think so. I don't think the card matters anymore, JR. I think WrestleMania has become like the Super Bowl. It's an event. You go to WrestleMania. You come from around the world to go to WrestleMania. They've done a great job in creating that.
I think the analogy to the Super Bowl is very applicable. Even though your favorite team may not be in the game, it's still the game. And you still want to go watch the game, either at a buddy's house, your house, or at the stadium, pray tell. I thought it was pretty cool that Coca-Cola became one of the title sponsors, or the title sponsor, to the next Tribute to the Troops. First of all, the Tribute to the Troops is a great project. Secondly, securing Coke is big business in my estimation. I think it's bigger news than people are letting on. Every kiss begins with K, the jeweler. I would never thought I would see them in wrestling. I don't know why. I just didn't.
Well, Toys R Us too. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I remember back to the Attitude Era, JR. I don't know if you remember this or not, but one of the big sponsors right before the Attitude Era kicked off was Skittles Taste the Rainbow.
Oh yeah.
And then once we started getting edgy, Vince said, "Listen, we can't have them on a sponsor on the show anymore. We can't have a commercial, Taste the Rainbow when Steve Austin's going out there and flipping birds to everybody." So we literally dropped them as a sponsor. So it's like when I watch today and I watch, your Tables, Ladders, and Chairs sponsored by Toys R Us, I'm like, ay.
The Skittles they sent me like a big tub of Skittles not long ago. And I get Skittles question on Twitter almost every day. It's amazing that people, those ad-lib promos that we did in the show, this portion of Monday Night Raw is brought to you by Skittles. Fruity, oh my God, King or Fruity. And half the time he had no clue what I was going to do, and was only praying that he didn't get a tag because he didn't have a card ready. He was king. He didn't, I was pulling the wagon, so it was good. I wasn't done with anybody else. Do you watch any other wrestling than WWE? Do you find yourself at all watching Ring of Honor or TNA?
No, not at all. The only I'll be honest with you. I watch Raw because I do a show after Raw on Monday night, and I get paid. Honestly, that's why I watch Raw. I did watch, and I even attended a Lucha Underground taping, and in my opinion, that's the best product out there right now because I think they're evolving the wrestling business with the way they're shooting it and the way they're treating it, and having the privilege to go to a TV taping. It was like as clear as day, JR. They run it like a television show. It's not like a wrestling show, and that's how the feel is backstage. It's like they're shooting a television show. So I'm a fan of Lucha Underground because I feel they're evolving the business where I feel a lot of these other companies are headed in the wrong direction.
Interesting about Lucha Underground because I've always felt, for whatever reason, and I don't know the exact way to explain it, but their show always seems to have a different texture, a different feel from the other shows like TNA and Ring of Honor, who are more traditional, except for Impact Wrestling's six-sided ring.
Yeah, no, JR, I think, again, look who we got involved with that company. We've got, movie makers. We've got, television people, and they're not wrestling people. And that's why, like I said, it's not, I think the WWE, TNA, I think they've gone backwards. I think the Attitude Era needed to evolve. Unfortunately, I think they went in the wrong direction. Lucha is evolving. It's changing the wrestling business. It's making it more of a television show. That's the way I think it needs to go.
Can Impact Wrestling make a comeback?
No, not as long as Dixie Carter's running the company. No.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was stiff.
You said to keep stuff short and sweet, JR.
I am. I appreciate your succinctness, but I didn't realize you're going to rip her shirt off and give her a knife-edge chop, for God's sakes. You brute. Why don't you just tell us like you feel? Well, let's hope for the sake of the guys that work there, you're wrong.
And you know what? I bet you that would be the second comment that Jim Cornette would agree with.
Now, Kenny, first of all, Russo, agree with my point about Kevin Owens, and now, Kenny, you fat bastard, put that cookie down, Kenny, you fat bastard. So, when I was little, I was very long.
Did I ever tell you my favorite Jim Cornette story?
Oh, my God.
Real quick.
I'm interested. Let's hear it.
I know this isn't on the agenda. Real quick.
It's all right.
JR, in my time at the WWE, and remember I worked with him at TNA too, I experienced one car ride with Jim Cornette. One car ride. It was me and him, okay? And, JR, we were going to the building, and literally a car cut him off, okay?
That's a big problem.
Bro, JR, he went ballistic. I'm not going to do the Cornette voice, but calling this person every name in the book, now he's hitting the gas to catch up with this person, right? So, JR, we get to a light, and he catches up with the person, right? He reached under his seat, JR, and guess what he pulls out?
No.
Yes, a gun. He shows the other driver of the car the gun and, like, literally scared the crowd. JR, it was a woman driving the car. The woman saw the gas, saw the gun, and, just floored it and took off at the light, thinking this maniac was going to kill her. So, JR, listen, I grew up in New York. I've never seen anybody pull a gun on another driver. So I was like, Jim, what the freak are you doing? I said, why are you driving around with a gun in your car? You ready, JR?
Yeah.
I'm a heel. I got to have a gun in my car. I never know who's going to come after me. I'm a heel. And from that day forward, I wouldn't even approach another vehicle that Jim Cornette was driving.
Well, you're not a heel. See, if you'd been a heel, it wouldn't have been violation of kayfabe.
Oh my God!
Hey, what projects have you got going on now? What are you doing most? Because your entrepreneurial ventures are unique, and I'm interested to hear a little bit about your thoughts about radio, because I always thought you'd do really well on radio, but nonetheless, what's going on in your life these days?
Well, Jay, I'm doing, like you, I'm doing my own podcasting. I have a whole network. I do a lot of video podcasting like every day. You can go to VinceRussoBrand.com. That's where I'm at. We have different shows every day, a bunch of shows where I don't even talk about wrestling. And it's funny that you mention that because I'm really trying to segue into radio, here in the Colorado market, but it's a very political environment, just like wrestling. So there's a lot of hurry up and wait. But quite frankly, I'd love to break into radio and have my own show on radio. And, I honestly, though, I'd like to, get away from wrestling. I appreciate everything it did for me. It supported my family. But I say this, JR, and this is the truth. I grew up a wrestling fan like the early 70s. The Valiant Brothers and Captain Lou and the Wizard and Freddie Blassie and Chief Jay and Bruno. And I say this all the time. If I was a kid today, I would not be a fan of this wrestling product. It's just not my cup of tea, man. I'm characters, I'm storyline. That's what, Vince's father raised me on at the WWF. And as I feel the business gets more and more and more away from that, and the emphasis is on the match, there's just not much in it for me anymore like there used to be.
I think sometimes we talked earlier about this as we wind it up here, but the announcers, I'm sympathetic of them. I have empathy for them from the standpoint that they take a great deal of burden is placed on their shoulders because of the way that they sound, and the soundtrack of what you see, what you're seeing cannot be completely disconnected from what you're hearing, or you really have your emotions are you've reshuffled your own deck. So in other words, if I'm seeing headlocks on TV, I need something that reminds me or takes me to or is related to two men or the two women in the ring and the headlock. Not that so-and-so last week, was trending. I don't have a problem with the trending information. I just have a problem when it's disseminated. And I think that one thing that WWE could do would be to more strategically place when and where they're going to get their liners in, that they're obligated to do. I get it. But when the bell to bell, we spend our time really immersed in trying to get the talents in the ring over, the winner and the loser, And I'm like you. We might come back to a short segment. If you said, "Hey JR, we're going to do a segment tonight between blank and blank," and they're going to use about 20 minutes, and then we're going to go to commercial. They're going to have a finish, go to commercial break. Cool. Do you want to know who wins? No, don't matter.
Yeah.
So I tell a 20-minute story. I know I got to do that, and I know they're going to be done. When they're done, they're done, because when we come back from commercial break, we're basically just going to reset where we are. Basically where we've come from to this point and where we're going. And because that segment may be short to get us back on, quote unquote, get us back on track. Yeah. But I believe having those longer segments and then a smart reset, not just come back and fill a minute, but be prepared to give them a good minute with something they didn't have. Then you probably would have a little happier viewer from time to time, as opposed to interrupting your train of thought when you're watching something.
JR, you know who it goes back to, and you'll appreciate this, and I hate the Dodgers because I'm a Giants fan, but, man, I could sit there, and after all these years, I could listen to Vince Scully all day long, because the stories he tells on, whether it's a Dodger, whether it's the opposing team, I mean, you're always learning something about, the individuals and the players that, you never knew before. You are a master at that. And, JR, I want to tell you something, and I mean this, from the bottom of my heart. I had a long conversation, with Shawn Michaels a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to make sure that happened, because as I was watching these Attitude Era shows over and over and over again, I started realizing, you know what? Shawn Michaels was the best talent I ever worked with. For a number of reasons, if you ask me, Shawn Michaels was the best I ever worked with. And I wanted to tell him that. It meant a lot for me to be able to tell him that, after all these years. So a couple of weeks ago, I had that opportunity. But it's the same with you, JR. Listen, people always say, JR was the best announcer in the business. And as I said, when I go back and I watch these episodes, the wrestling business as a whole just hasn't been the same since your voice left. I mean, it's that simple. The wrestling business lost something when your voice was no longer heard. And, man, you can't – it's funny, JR, because, listen, man, the Austins come and go, and the Michaels and the Rocks and all these wrestlers come in and out, and then, then there's Cena, then there's Lesnar. But it's like when your voice was eliminated, that has never been replaced. And you would never think that an announcer would have that kind of an impact. But like I said, now with the WWE Network, and I'll give them their little plug, if you go back and listen to you're listening to an artist. And I mean, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And, you'll never be replaced. And we lost a lot the day your voice was silenced. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate it very much. VinceRusso.com. If a promoter out there wants you to
VinceRussoBrand.com.
Vince Russo Brand, ladies and gentlemen. Vince Russo Brand, BRAND.com. And it's a site where you can go, you can find out everything you need to know on VinceRussoBrand.com. And if you are a promoter and have an idea for Vince, here's the thing about these guys doing these indie shows. Instead of bringing you in and you taking your obligatory bumps, which would be a not no but hell no for me, I would say an enterprising promoter would do well to say, let's bring Russo in and have him do autographs, pictures, and a Q&A. Q&A would be the money. Let them ask whatever they want, and you could, there you go. They're right there. So, and sometimes, and I love those. When I do my shows, I love those Q&As. They're fun. But nonetheless, listen, thanks for taking time to join me. Thanks for watching TLC, even though you might not have, or maybe you would have at some point. I appreciate you doing that. I hope VinceRussoBrand.com continues to do well. If I can ever help you, please let me know. And
JR, I have to. I mean, people are asking me all the time to bring you on my show. I definitely, it would be such an honor to be able to have you on our show. The people that follow me would go absolutely crazy.
Let's do it some late night when I'm in the right mood.
That's the best time for me as well.
Yeah, or I'll just come out to Colorado and spend a couple of weeks. Honey, I got to go out and I think Russo and I may do a documentary. We're going to talk about it. And then again,
that'd be tremendous.
Yeah, then again, we may not talk about it, or we may not do it, but we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, that would be tremendous.
Then she would call your house. Where's JR? I don't know. He said he was going shopping. And last I heard, he had a bag of Doritos and some French onion dip and said he was going to go listen to music. I don't know where the hell he is.
That was the last I saw him.
That's the last I saw him. So listen, thanks a lot. I appreciate you. I'll look forward to hearing from you. And folks, bookmark VinceRussoBrand.com. Please do that. And Vince, thanks for taking time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, JR. Thank you. It was an honor.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.